The story begins with a sprawling modern city in a Japanese province. The inner monologue shows a man's dream of city life which lasted 10 years turned to bitterness. Overwhelmed with work, he collapsed unconscious right at the desk, correcting his boss's mistakes. His daily commute to work is a disgusting crush of bodies in the morning train. He makes a vow to himself, never to become a terrible boss like his own. Exhausted from overtime, he barely makes it to the last train home. He is so tired that he can't even open his favorite books, only the cats greet him with meows. Lying in his small bed, he longs for the quiet peace of his hometown. Suddenly his eyes snap open sharply, filled with shock and confusion. He wakes up as a child hidden in a pile of pillows on a huge luxurious bed. In the luxurious room he stares and his head buzzes with confusion. What the? He watches the crystal top of the candelabra and feels that the situation is too strange. Raising his eyes to the high ceiling space, he froze in shock. Before him his own tiny hands. In the quick panel a blurred trace of movement as he moves forward. He stirs under heavy blankets and wonders if, by any chance, he himself has shrunk in size. A little boy peeks his head over the edge of a giant bed. His eyes look through a large arched window into an unfamiliar world. He sees a medieval town and wonders where he has ended up, while a voice calls his name. She was rushing to him, warning of danger, and evoking a memory of how he once simply whimpered. He marvels at the incredible garden view, losing his balance, and his amazing creation completely throws him off track. Till is stunned and cannot comprehend how a 2-year-old child learned to speak so fluently. Frightened by her sudden appearance, he asks who she is and she freezes in shock. The young man mentally clarifies he is not about, but almost 30 years old. In close-up his face, he is digesting the colossal age discrepancy. His thoughts swirl as he contemplates the possibility of reincarnation, and realizes that he has 2 sets of memories. Testing his theory, he asks the maid if her name is Till, and she beams with confirmation. Continuing the investigation, he then asks if his own name is really Van Ferdio. He correctly names his father and brothers, until he moves on to boasting about being gifted. She is stunned that he knows the names of his brothers, hardly ever sees them. Van sits on the bed, arms crossed over his chest, deeply pondering, trying to comprehend his new reality. The scene switches to the banquet hall, where his stern father, Marquis Yalpa, is eating. His 3 older brothers, Mercia, Jard, and Sesta, sit at the long table. In the silence of the empty hall, only the clinking of silverware against plates is heard. A person blows on their food to cool it before eating. Van, in a high chair, is fed by one of the maids who brings a spoonful of food. Several maids pamper him and praise him for eating his vegetables so well. Inside, he thinks whether he has ended up in a cabaret club surrounded by women he has appeased, who cling with their glances. He comically reflects that he would gladly pay 30,000 yen for such a level of service. Leaving his jokes behind, the expression on his face becomes more thoughtful and serious. We call him the second son. Jard, as soon as someone addresses him, he flinches. His father demands that the sons tell him exactly what they plan to study during the day. They explain it is a family tradition. At lunch they report their plans, and in the evening about their progress. Having listened to the elder son, Mark turns his inquisitive gaze to Sesto. Sesto enthusiastically announces that his plan for today is to study magic. Then Marcus's attention falls on Van, the one he usually does not ask. The majestic man leans toward his 2-year-old son and asks what his plans for the day are. Van calmly replies that he will start with studying national culture and history. The father lifts his gaze from the food, and on his face is an expression of pure astonishment. Van's older brothers watch him intently. Their faces are masks of complete shock. A simple transition between panels immediately changes the atmosphere. The Marquis bursts out laughing at Hardy. He proclaims Van magnificent, as if for a 2-year-old child. He confidently states that Van has the same powerful fire magic as himself and his late wife. Van says that he eagerly awaits his magical ability test when he turns 8. In a world filled with magic, a person's magical potential is of paramount importance. The Marquis's tense gaze reveals the high expectations he holds for his youngest son. It turns out that Noble's desire above all either combat elemental magic or healing magic. After the explanation, there is immediately a simple transition between panels. Van notes that the Fairtheo family prides itself on its powerful offensive fire magic. He points out that the technology of this world is medieval, and gunpowder is underutilized due to magic. The most important thing that defines this new world above all is magic. He recalls he is in the kingdom of Skeujurea, where his father was recently appointed Marquis. In a later scene, Van questioned Till about sea travel and learned that ships are for attacking magic beasts. He shudders at the very thought of the existence of monsters, and he understands. The age of exploration has not yet come. Till explains the existence of other races, elves and dwarves, who keep to themselves and live alone. Worried that the information is too complicated, the young Lord Vaughn asked if he wanted to sleep. Van politely refuses, assuring that he is fine, and says he asks questions because he wants to learn. The maids are embarrassed by his maturity but agree. They do not mind his questions. After that, he inquires about magical artifacts and learns that some stones can store power. Falling silent in his ear, the maids are surprised. No nobleman has ever spoken to them so kindly. They unanimously decide that he is a prodigy and does not behave according to his age at all. The head butler, Esparta, meets Vaughn with a look, slams his palms on the table and criticizes his knowledge. Van recognizes the majestic man as the great butler, the one who served his father for years. Although frightened by the fierce, terrible, scythe-like smile of Spartus, Vanna insists that he can both speak well and listen. When asked about the alphabet, Van admits that he is not very skilled at it yet. He says he can add, but freezes when it comes to his ability to subtract. Esparta tests him, raises 2 fingers and 3 fingers and asks what the sum is. Then he asked Van to subtract 2 from 7, and Van also answered correctly. After the improvised quiz question, a heavy silence falls in the room that does not let go. Esparta makes an unexpected decision, begins to personally teach Van twice a week. The following lessons were hellish, and Van had no idea whether his relentless mentor was an android. He even suspects that Spartus might be a golem or undead because of the exhausting lessons. The next 2 years he spent days drowning in study. At 4 years old he begins fencing. May shows him how to make the proper strike. His quick reflexes impress the maids, and he compares the feeling to flirting. The mage gasps with delight and thinks he spent as much as 50,000 yen on this. The cheerful maid playfully calls out his name during the sword training duel. Quickly, FWING, she lowers the wooden training sword toward him. She stands triumphantly with the sword, shouting that she has won against Lord Van. From the force of her strike, she comically flips backward and, laughing heartily, chuckles skillfully. Another maid grabs the victor and sternly reminds her, sliding on the path is a deadly crime. One is not allowed to move a noble person. The other maids agree. Such audacity toward a noble is a serious crime that cannot go unpunished. Van approaches the frightened maid and barely but confidently touches her forehead with the back of his hand, a short, soft slap on the brow. He declares that it is all over, and the relieved maids barely utter their agreement through tears. After 6 months of training, the maid tearfully repents her former insolence and apologizes. Van recalls his past life experience with judo and other martial arts. At 5 years old, he begins duels with older boys with a training saber, blunted. He recalls the principle of judo, to break the opponent's stance to gain an advantage. He understands that the philosophies of both judo and karate coexist in the art of swordsmanship. His current opponent is a boy at least 10 years older, taller and with greater reach. Van Cully watches the opponent's monotonous movements and is confident he can read his strategy. During sword training, the young Lord Van stands victorious, self-assured, and his skill is praised. Other boys whisper that Van is eccentric, but he is approachable, unlike his reclusive brothers. His victory attracts the attention of the deputy knight commander, the key figure in the household. With astonishing intensity, he firmly demands that the young boys show him their hands. The commander examines Van's soft, uncalloused palms, notices the long nails, and studies them with a thoughtful expression for a long time. Caught off guard by the inspection, Van apologizes and promises to get his act together when he grows older. Drems reproaches Van for lack of training, but Van replies, he has no free time, he is busy studying. Van is completely stunned upon learning from Dai that the workload in his training is far from normal. Understanding that Van was overloaded with work, he unenthusiastically suggests intervening so that we could practice fencing more. Considering that Van's mentor was a fool, he decided to make the boy a legendary knight. Van shuddered at how the commander, too tense and seriously to the bone, announced his new goal. He mentally calls his academic mentor Esparta the great brain among his 2 mentors. Van decides that he likes both swords and training equally, so he sets a goal to persistently keep pace in both disciplines. De Grumbles grumbles but agrees, stating that he will personally oversee Van's sword training. Surprised by this new schedule, Van emits a slight uncertainty with a nervous laugh. The commander's harsh training regime starts with the order, 100 pull-ups. He gives commands for 100 bends and 100 piercing strikes. Van is already sweating from exhaustion, struggling to keep up with the insane speed. Staggering on his feet, he pleadingly drags out time until a rest and explains that he was just running all this time. Debolo says that he can rest when he rests and promises to do these exercises together with him. Completely exhausted after swinging with all his might, Van falls powerless, considering his coach a demon. lazily acknowledges Van's request for rest, and suddenly a bright thought strikes his head. He absurdly argues that rest is holding a sitting pose in place, sitting above the chair without sitting down. Van's thought about his mentor sharply changes. He realizes that the commander is not a demon but an idiot. The onlooker bursts out laughing as the commander stubbornly demonstrates the exercise, then gives a silly definition of rest. Other soldiers call out from afar, encouraging Van, but the commander orders, "Be careful." The maid brings Van a towel and praises his work while he finally leans back on the bench to rest. The cheerful maid whom he once spared tells him that seeing him work so hard is a real pleasure. Van notes, despite all the chaos, every day after his rebirth was truly a real pleasure. Filled with deep satisfaction, he vows to become the best nobleman in history. A dark flash-forward shows Sparta's deep disappointment, his ancient warning echoes eerily. Van's satisfied life is abruptly cut off. A shadowy stranger drives him out of sight. History repeats itself. 2 years have passed, and the 6-year-old Van is already bustling through the city full of people. Riding in the van, he marvels at the lively crowd hustle, notices people staring and finds it less exciting. A familiar voice calls his name and, looking intently, draws attention to himself. From a high balcony, the maid suggests to go to the city market to have fun. Van recalls his rebirth as the son of Marcus and the hellish routine that followed him. This panel is texture, so nothing to describe. He remembers rumors about his adult training sessions in combat skills against older boys. He admits it with a weary smile. He has stood out for too long. His maid playfully teases that his genius might make him inherit the entire estate. Van lets out a nervous chuckle as soon as she realizes how dangerously her innocent words might turn out. He knows in the noble world the strongest survive and the heir takes everything. He fears becoming the target of a murder conspiracy, a conspiracy woven by his own ambitious brothers. The memory shows how his 2 older brothers look through cold, calculating expressions on their faces. He concludes he must completely stop standing out or the brothers will definitely kill him. Arriving at the market, he decides to behave like an ordinary child playing and fooling around. He admits throughout his life he has only worked and does not know what ordinary people do for fun. His attention is caught by a huge luxurious building dominating the street. In delight, he compares the huge store to Corso and greedily rushes there. His excitement is interrupted by a man pulling a dirty child by a rope. A close-up shows the impoverished, resigned expression on the child's face, the body covered in dirt. The cruel man yells at the gathering and shouts to the crowd that this is not a side attraction. One of Van's guards twitches in horror and instinctively reaches for his sword upon seeing this cruel scene. In anger, the man announces the boy's son he is going to sell him into slavery. Van is shocked to learn that slavery exists in this response. The man's cruel reasoning is revealed. His maid explains that slavery is allowed to repay debts or as punishment for crimes. The humiliated boy watches as his father explains the debt transfer system. Van realizes with disgust, slavery in this society is deeply rooted and perceived as normal. A confident woman with charisma appears right now and immediately recognizes Van as Marcus's son. She herself has seen how his outfit enchants, but the woman points to his formal attire. She recognizes the family crest on his cloak and immediately determines he is a prodigy. She meets him at the Merry Chamber of Commerce, boasting that they have absolutely everything. The woman introduces herself as Rosalia and politely, solemnly greets him. The man trying to sell his son noticeably trembles from Van's noble status. He turns pale, nervously breaks out in sweat as the reality of what happened slowly sinks in. Van ignores the pleasantries and asks Rosalia how much the boy can be valued at. Rosalia glanced at the boy, assessed his age, and asked how much he costs. As soon as she finds out that the boy has thieving magic, she immediately declares, he is worth only 3 large silvers. The father fiercely resists, insisting that other slaves are sold for at least 5. Rosalie Killy explains, 3 silvers is a fair price for a small, untrained boy. Angry at this assessment, the father shouts that his son is completely useless. He raises his hand either to hit the child, shouting that he is worth almost nothing. He shouted for him to stop, reproaching the man for cruelty to his own child. The father objected in Rosalie. Neither he nor the other party is obliged to complete this deal. When the father abruptly pulls the boy from his hands, Van firmly and without hesitation announces his decision. Van steps forward, extends 5 large silvers, and looks the father straight in the eyes. He holds the man's gaze and confidently waits for a response. Van pauses to calm down, fearing that his emotions might harm the boy. He paused and then panicked, realizing that they only have gold coins, the necessary silvers are missing. Rosalie silently intervenes, offering to take the shifts upon herself and settle the deal. The father snatches the coins and walks away, not looking back. The little silent child remains sitting on the ground alone. The rope is still tied. Van squats down and carefully asks if the boy is injured and if he can stand up. He tells the boy named comes in that he is now free. Van nervously wondered how to explain this, because he could not just take and abandon the boy. He asks if Kamzin has anywhere to go and offers a job at his home. His bodyguard explains, Marquis will not hire anyone without a background check unless it is a slave. Van apologizes and asks Kempson if he agrees to go with him on such terms. He suggests first getting new clothes. He wants to celebrate their new alliance. Rosalie interrupts and says, first you must conclude a proper slave contract. Van politely asks to hold her hands to ease the magical process. A dazzling light shines as a magical contract is formed between two boys. Burning lines of light form a complex symbol on the back of the Khamsan's hand. Rosalie explains that this is the mark of a slave contract created by her contract magic. She waves the fee and Van thanks her and already disappears, though he feels guilt in his soul. Rosalie is embarrassed. No nobleman has ever thanked her before. Rising, she offers to show them the clothing shop. Van takes Thompson's hand and nods, as if to say they should start by picking out clothes for him. As they walk, Sidon firmly and meaningfully squeezes Vaughn's hand. In a well-stocked clothing store, they choose a certain section of items. The young lord points to a rack with elegant, high-quality clothing for his companion. Then the shopkeeper offers a more typical lower category of clothing worn by slaves. Van firmly refuses, insisting that his new friend should get higher quality clothes. Kumson silently stands in his rags, his face gloomy and detached. The shopkeeper thanks his lord, recalling the unexpected and generous purchase. Van internally reviews the consequences and decisions he has just made unplanned and too significant. Kumson, already dressed in his new clothes, thinks that this will be for the best. The boy in glasses peers through the creaky open window pane of the door, calling Lord Vaughn. He informs his young lord that the Deputy Commander D is currently looking for him. Van Hansenma orders him to say that he has already left. The messenger remained completely stunned by his lord's strange order. Kumson explains his reluctance to wear gloves. He fears how others will react to his mark. Van insists proof of their unity must be the slave market, and this must be shown to everyone. Then he admits that he had earlier bought a pair of gloves for himself. When Kuma agrees to put them on, the messenger bursts in with a frantic breath. The boy reports Van's disappearance, hinting that the witness was probably hallucinating. Deputy Commander D. Injurely confronts Kumsan, interrogating where the crumbs on his mouth came from. Kumsan discreetly tries to wipe away evidence of his recent snack. He denies it, but the commander insists he saw with his own eyes how he ate it. Ruthlessly, Baraitsuna reproaches Kumsan for ignoring the order from the chivalric order. The commander growls in disbelief. The young slave dares to answer him. He is struck by an idea. He will train Kumzin in Lord Von's stead. Seemzin can only stare back frozen in silent shock, and he disgustedly wonders if he is a target. From behind the door, Von tries to hold back laughter as Kumsan gets into trouble. Van reflects on his Balan to slowly lose prodigy status and become ordinary. From above, the estate is visible. Time passes along its contours. Van is already 8. The large estate, Grand Family Estate, becomes the backdrop for the decisive event. The staff excitedly and fervently discuss the upcoming test of magical abilities for the young genius. They expressed confidence that he would have powerful elemental magic, like his entire family. In the spacious hall, a voice casts doubt on the stunning results of his magical test. The question was asked directly, does he really have no elemental abilities at all? The young nobleman sneers disdainfully, taking the unexpected result lightly. He quickly feigns surprise, while Van's father delivers another blow, shock and complete denial. Van, nervously sweating, recalls that his ability is production magic, or alchemy. Magic is explained as the power that creates imaginary objects from existing materials. However, this is considered ineffective. Others can achieve similar results without magic. The image that his magic is useless settles on the young boy's face. Inside, Van celebrates that he revealed his 2-year plan to ruin his own reputation. The dark background details the magic they truly wish to know, elemental and healing. His older brother Mersha earned the right of heir through incredible hard work. 2 other brothers, both fire mages, constantly mock Mersha because of his element. With fierce stomping, the father bellows, waved aside his supposed prodigy status. He bitterly scolds how he and his late wife could have produced such a child. Van recalls his mother's death. She was killed by his own powerful mana, which flared up at birth. His father convulsively clenches a pendant and calls himself a fool for the hope he misplaced. Drop by drop, sweat trickles down Van's temples and his delicate, worried face. The situation escalates when his father snatches a sword with a sharp clang. He swears his home will not become a laughingstock, and fear fills the wagon. His father asks what to do with this terrible source of shame. A resolute, slightly older wagon stands next to a portrait of himself in youth. Mersha approaches his father and offers a solution through one specific village. He proposes to send his younger brother, Van, to this remote place. He describes a nameless village spread out in a resource-rich mountain range. The map shows its strategic location between two warring territories. The father understands how brilliant this idea is to take control of the arrival. Supplying cargo provides the perfect excuse to station people overnight in this area. Placing a family member there creates a plausible reason for a military presence. The sign captures the cunning of the plan and gives us its approval. After that, he solemnly entrusts his young son, Van, to govern the village. As they leave, the father cynically remarks on how well Mersha calculates everything. Later, Mersha kneels before his younger brother and offers a sincere apology. He could not watch Van suffer just as he could not stand his magic. Van refuses to blame him and insists that his brother actually saved him. He runs through in his mind the terrible alternatives that could have awaited him without this exile. Although the situation looks hopeless, he sees a new chance in it. Pressing the app, he swears not to waste the chance his brother gave him. Mersha looks at his younger brother with a gaze full of admiration. He calls Vanna a genius, admiring his maturity and life-affirming outlook. He praises Van's wisdom, acknowledging that this guy is more noticeable than himself. He reveals that the house has long been singing Hosanna to Vans. Mersha feels in her gut, in the future, abilities that are fading will be needed. He humbly admits his own limitations before this future. He extends a small sign and vows to do everything he can to help. A pair of brothers pass by with a glance, and gratitude and respect strengthen their bond. He passionately declared that Lord Vogan is a smart and wonderful nobleman. She is outraged by his exile, while someone else reminds her about the gag order. He thanks her for her concern but says he is eager to set off. The maid is completely stunned by his unexpectedly joyful mood. He is enlightened. Exile is actually a ticket to freedom. He imagines a carefree life with plenty of free time like a country squire. His idealistic vision is shattered the moment he sees his chaotic retinue. With a terribly bad feeling, he realizes his life will be too busy. The cynical man thinks that nobles always put profit above people. He believes that the safety of civilians is only a secondary concern for them. And the traveler named Ortho reviews the request to guard the noble's child. His companion expresses disgust at the nobles who look down on commoners. Ortho explains they accepted this task only to remain in the Marquis's territory. Van der Riv conquered them with a bright smile, disarming with a greeting in a polite introduction. He compliments the strength of Orthos and completely throws the experienced traveler off track. Van equates this adventure to a cool hero from history textbooks. He looks at the man's weapon simply gigantic and asks if it is not too heavy. The companion explains, the strength of this weapon is in its incredible weight. A pack of cynical adventurers is completely dismantled by his true nature. Orda remains thoughtful. She is impressed and surprised by the unexpected character of the young lord. Van Waves excitedly exclaimed that he is impatient to start the journey with them. The adventurers find him pleasant and decide to treat him with respect. Preparations officially begin for their long journey to the village. Van makes a travel plan, including carts, and discusses 12 adventurous trips. He thanks his brother with great relief for the spacious travel conditions. With a passionate exclamation, Till declares, she has arranged to become Vina's personal maid. She burns with anger over the ban on spreading information, while simplified Van watches her anxiously. A muscular man named D declares that he is joining them to teach Van swordsmanship. Another knight throws questions into order, and two others shout for D because of his unexpected arrival. The old butler Esparta informs Vona that he has told Lord Yalpo about his early retirement. Standing next to the fully loaded carriage, Aspar explains, Marcos gave his full consent. Van asks himself, would his father so easily part with such a loyal butler? His gaze sharpens as he suspiciously stares at the old man. Esparta threw back a clever look as he approached the carriage. The elegant carriage stands ready and awaits its new expanded group of passengers. Leaning forward with a sly smile, he flashed a look as if he was about to start monitoring Van's experiments. Van blushed under the mask of torment, clenched his fist and begged, don't do this. He thinks aloud whether they all conspired to watch him just to torment him. To not lose dignity, Van Tel says, he has strong allies and that at least is reassuring. Till approaches with a radiant smile and asks if something good happened. He is surprised that she notices he is smiling. Van admits that he is happy because she and all the others are going with him. His two companions have already stopped to see this and hear his sincere confession. Till proudly explains that she defended her position as his personal maid before Lord Mercia. Vankomi can only guess whether the tournament was to decide who has the right to accompany him. She explains that he is not like his brothers who ignore the staff. She recalls how he kindly greets the maids every day. He is also remembered for treating them to sweets and even helping to clean. Two more maids warmly agree. The staff who train with him in fencing love him just as much. A thin blush barely dusts the cheeks when he learns about his popularity. Out of shame, he reaches out and offers to stay at the estate, hoping for this opportunity. Approach and decisively reject the offer, declaring that he will serve Van for life. Blinded by such intensity, Van jokingly asks if this is a marriage proposal. Compson looks at him with sincere eyes, confesses love, and even bows. A powerful oath of loyalty unsettles Van. He is completely stunned. When the carriage sets off, someone in the audience notices that Compson has grown. The turning of the carriage wheel signals the true start of their journey. Van notices the carriage's elbows with the family crest, a sign of his secret departure. As they pass through the gate, he reflects on his father's wish to erase him. A young girl, the guard's daughter, recognizes Van on the street. She asked where he was going in a surprise truck, as if she had been told. Suddenly, horsemen appear on horseback with flags in their hands and arrange a humiliating procession. One night, he explained the deorder to Grand Sandoff, ignoring the wishes of the marquises. He happily guesses that D had no idea about the secret order at all. The man announces the departure of Vans to the whole town and causes a commotion. He begs the gathered crowd to give the young lord the most solemn farewell. The townspeople shout to Van and ask him to return as soon as possible. Waving from the carriage, Van promises the emotional crowd that he will not disappear for long. Inside, he admits that despite all efforts, he broke down and cried. He accepts the handkerchief handed to him, and as long as it is in his hands, he cries beside him. A hand extends a skewer with freshly roasted meat to the young lord. After they pass through two towns, the squad sets up the first camp. Van recalls the experience of his past life, how he slept, and how he moved along with the transport. He notes that this is his first time camping in a dangerous world where magical beasts roam. The adventurer leader Ortho's sheet is introduced as their veteran guardian. Ortho extends his rapier to Van, who accepts it with a joyful, "Wai-ha." Van thanks him, impressed by how professional and accurate he speaks. Ortho professionally explains everything well to Van dare rest after his perimeter check. Late that night, Ortho went down the stairs to Van and asked if something was wrong. Van brushes off his anxiety, and Ortho promises to make another report a little later. Till comes with a tray and laughs, as if it was meant to be just like Van Asser would do. She proudly boasts that she can appreciate his fame better than any adventure. Two covered wagons make their way through endless snowy mountain ridges. A memory shows the company camping after leaving the second city on their route. They reach a small settlement, the fourth on their path to finally rest. Van counts the incredible distance they have covered in the last 2 weeks. He marvels at the gigantic scale of the territory within the banner site. In the carriage, Till tells Van that they will soon arrive at the village. He mentally prepares for their arrival, comparing it to a corporate transfer. The chariot suddenly creaks and convulsively jerks into a bloody, slapping stop. They look back and see, ahead in the fortified village, smoke rises. The frightened voice of the driver confirms the village is under attack. All participants gather in the ravine to assess the grim situation. The man guesses about the attackers. Are they bandits or mercenaries fleeing? Ortho warns Van to retreat, but Van says he is used to fighting. They notice armored troops and mages lined up in front of the village gate. Van sees the villagers are trapped inside like turtles in a shell. The knight passionately declares that they must join the battle and act together. Van warns it is not worth going into battle against an unknown enemy, as it may be pointless. One of his companions agrees and says that it is too dangerous. Ortho explains his principle: never agree to a request that sacrifices his party members. Coldly and grimly he says, if he risked all lives, they would have been dead long ago. He solemnly declares his sworn service to protect the new lands of his lord. Ortho acknowledges the honor of D, but says it has nothing to do with his group. He offers to escort Van to safety, depending on how the situation unfolds. With a firm hand, Ortho refuses to fight, stating that the path of D is self-sacrifice. The group tries to calculate the odds while he marks the forces, and sees that 30 enemies already stand ahead. Sparta offers to fight as a mage, but Orta does not believe and refuses. Sparta coolly suggests that they can observe the enemy's combat power from a safe distance. He outlines the strategy to build a barrier and launch a sudden flank attack. Van quickly realizes their only goal is to distract, attack, and prevent the escape. The strategist confirms Van must act as bait, otherwise the knights will surely perish. Van rejects the plan, stating that Esparto will definitely die. The young lord turns away, and determination chills in his gaze. He stands before his loyal followers and prepares to make a fateful decision. A collective sharp cry of protest erupts from his comrades. The grieving Hole still pleads, "Let her meet the enemies herself." As the scene moves forward, he resolutely declares that he will go with them too. Van cuts them off mid-sentence and reminds them that the main goal of the plan is the final outcome. He waves his hand, trying to calm their emotional protests and regain control. Staring intently, he declares his authority. He is the one in charge here. He explains to Ordi that his contract does not provide for fighting to save the village. He tells Espada that his past service to the family means he must not die here. He reminds Dee that the knights serve his father, not him personally. He tells her, his throat breaking with sobs, until he sees her like a sister he cannot bear to lose. With a serious face, Von Tell explained that he does not need to die for him. He adds that he is glad Kamsan is enjoying his new life. Both Kamsan and Till are brought to tears by the deep kindness of their lord. Van's face hardens as he offers solemn apologies to his followers. He apologizes to everyone for the difficult decision he is about to make. Clenching his sword, the young lord begins to lay out his battle plan. He outlines his strategy for a frontal assault and pincer flank attacks. Van says if they kill him, they must leave his body. He assures them Dutch will not worry if his identity remains a secret. Hearing this, Ortona lets out a long, irritated sigh and finally gives up. He grabs Van by the collar and declares that they will risk their lives for him. The adventurer warns Van and says, "The more you talk, the more everyone will get reprimanded." The cynical woman admits she has only seen nobles who do nothing but talk. That is why she declares her group now wants to risk their lives. Her fellow adventurers line up behind and also express the same determination. The knights likewise swore allegiance to protect Lord Van in his future. In Memories, Sparta warning Van walks by to recall his noble duties and responsibilities. Sick from lies, he swore that the exile would end in 3 days. In Memories, the younger Van complains to Sparta about the long wait. Now Sparta takes command and announces her distance for the attack plan. He orders D and his knights to attack from the left flank. Esparta orders Ort and his comrades to attack from the right. The remaining forces are ordered to wait and hold reserve in case of any emergencies. With a single shout, Roger's entire party immediately springs into action. They rush forward with grim determination, ready to execute the plan. Suddenly, huge chunks of earth erupt from beneath them. From afar, the knights look at the completed wall and praise the magical butler. They assume that Esparta would sacrifice himself for the young master. Ort notes that his notion of nobility has completely changed. The cynical traveler is now interested in Van and has sworn to help him. She risks her life for a strategy created to protect everyone involved. Ortho notices the strange boy Vanna for being ready to die for others. Van stands alone on the newly built wall and stares dead downwards, gloomily gazing into the distance. His hand rests on the stone, feeling the weight of his decision. Till and Kamzin rush to him and clasp in tight embraces. She sobbed with relief, repeating words of thanks again and again that Vansama is safe. See how the oath becomes Van's shield, and how it leads him step by step to death. Van looks down with quiet sadness, understanding how heavy their feelings lie. He feels that to him they are like his own family. He reminds them this is a battle, so they must do everything in their power. The others assure that they will help if it becomes dangerous. Wiping their tears until Kamsan recovers and gathers for battle. They give the final Roger before the massive earth and wall. The crackling battle cries of the bandits, bursting with overconfidence, echo outside just beyond the village. A new chapter begins. The bandits haven't even thought everything through to the end. They decided that the small settlement is poorly governed and that it would be an easy prey. The robbers laugh about the feasts they will hold after their swift victory. Suddenly, an arrow with a dull thud strikes the back of one of the attackers. Panic spreads as they realize they are being attacked from behind. They freeze in shock before a giant wall that suddenly appeared. Their confusion turns into horror because danger is closing in on them from all sides. The robbers understood that they were caught in a pincer movement. Ortho notices that the knight named D wields his heavy saber effortlessly. A formidable figure appears, the deputy commander of the Order Fertile Shabarak. The bandits are gripped by panic as soon as they see the legendary knight. They shout to each other to run, knowing they will die if they engage in battle. Ortho catches up with the fleeing bandit and cuts him down on the spot, shouting that there are fewer of them now. He notices a lone bandit who, in a desperate dash, is running along the wall. Other adventurers join the chase and shout for someone to stop the one who is running away. Ortho realizes the wall creates a dangerous blind spot for their archers. He shouts a warning to his comrade on the bandit's direct path. The woman in glasses notices the axe in the bandit's hands. He is rushing straight at her. In panic, she realizes her spell is recharging and she cannot defend herself. When the axe flies down, she believes now she will be killed. In a blurred flash of movement, Vaughn and Kamzin rush to intercept the attack. Van mocks the bandit, calling him a giant heavyweight wrestler to draw attention. The woman in glasses thinks he is reckless and goes against the formidable enemy alone. Van's sword flashes and cuts into the bandit. He recoils backward and falls while moving. Another bandit attacks the woman, but Van rushes to intercept the blow. Defending her, he orders his troops to concentrate their strikes forward. The woman freezes and looks. She has no idea who this incredible and powerful child is. After the battle, the bandits are tied up. They are defeated and no one is hurt. The woman is curious about something while they discuss collecting their fee. And those who suggest this hint that they should stay even if there is no money in it. He says their party deals with euro, but we will return. His companions agree, saying they will hunt magical beasts in the forest for profit. The woman says that Van is neither a typical nobleman nor an ordinary boy. The author agrees. It is precisely because of Van's courage and wit that he wants to stay. He notes Van's noble elegance crumbles the moment he opens his mouth. Van is polite and treats commoners as equals, not as inferior beings. For the first time, Ordo feels that a nobleman is before him with genuine determination. All his companions agree in their assessment of the young lord. They assume that down there he was ready to die for them. They praise his nighttime fencing style and mature tactical moves. They wondered what territory he would build when he grew up. Ordo asks his companions how they feel about staying and helping. He states that Van is the friendliest nobleman he has ever known. 4 of his companions exchange glances, a silent, unanimous agreement. After that, Van was emotionally satisfied, but she had to risk her life first. Van agrees just so she would be quiet and stop crying while Kamzin watches. Realizing that Clemcha was hit in the fight by a fist, he understood. He needed to become stronger. The adventure woman peeks out, sharply frightening the quiet one who is still softly sniffling. She teases Van for making young ladies cry at such a young age. Van smiles, says he always tries to be sincere with women. He clarifies that with the women he cherishes, he is extremely sincere. The woman asks if he is an elf and notes that he behaves too maturely. Van denies this and explains his upbringing and indifference to informal agreements. She asked if he learned his way of thinking from the butler. The woman kneels and says that he saved her with his actions, so it was ensured. Smiling, Van tells her that it's all right and let it go and forget. In an internal monologue, the woman acknowledges the undeniable reality of what is happening before her. Her thoughts confirm young Lord Van has already completely won her devotion. Arriving at the destination, Vans cheerfully announce their arrival, though they are late. With a bright, determined smile, Van declares that their first meeting will be historic. A cautious crowd of peasants, men, women, and children stands and waits for them. The men from the village are armed with simple spears and look with icy, distrustful expressions on their faces. When his polished boots stand firmly on the ground, he solemnly introduces himself, Vin Fertio. Pressing his palm to his chest, he explains that he was sent by the new ruler to govern them. An old man named Rhonda steps forward, introduces himself, and calls himself the village elder, thanking for everything. Van addresses the elder, acknowledging rumors that the local owners and soldiers have been left without a leader. He firmly declares his intention to take command and protect the entire village. Bowing low in a homely manner, he humbly asks for their understanding and help. The elder, moved by his kindness, calls them inside and shows that once there were 150 people in the village. His extremely formal apologies are perceived as excessive by one of his own companions. In response to Van's sincere kindness, the elder leads them to his simple wooden house. With sadness, he explains that the population of this village was once much larger than it is now. Inside, he reveals that recent targeted attacks have reduced their number to just 100. The elders attributed this to their vulnerability due to the nearest border patrol units abandoning them. Van's calm and outstanding companion Esparta listens to the grim report with a sharp, tense gaze. The elder summarizes that from now on the village is under constant threat under the rule of the new lords. He explains the political complexity. The former ruler still has many supporters in the region. Elder grimly states that no one even thinks about defending their small, poor village. With new determination, Van promises to keep the old man informed of all future plans. The duck snorts disdainfully at this meeting and says that complaining makes no sense. He aggressively attacks Van and demands to know if this is his message to the nobility. With a tense face, the man introduces himself. He is the son of Ragda Malaga. Watermark panels calmly ask the man to sit down, stating that he is the one in charge of this village. An impassioned man openly shows his contempt for simple complaints about their dire situation. His furious outburst disrupts the meeting as he directly confronts the young lord. Clenching his fists, the son of Ragna Malaga recognizably names himself with a gaze full of challenge. Unmoved by the man's anger, Van calmly asks him to sit and speaks on behalf of the village. He believes the problem may be a fundamental defect in the kingdom's laws. The village elders sit in a circle and attentively listen to their new young lord. He pauses, freezing for a moment in thought as he chooses his next words. He asked them what they were truly afraid of and declared that he would govern this village. Pressing his palm to his chest, the young lord speaks with unwavering conviction. He insists that mere complaints about the kingdom's laws will not change their fate. A woman raises her hand, reminding him there are still people in the village. Confidently states that they have already considered 3 specific measures to save themselves. Their first plan was to create something so valuable that the kingdom could not ignore them. Their second idea was to earn enough money to hire mercenaries for regular protection. Their third and final goal is to rebuild and develop the village on their own. However, she admits that they have not managed to implement any of these plans. Van understands their logistical problems prevent them from making any real profit. The peasants could not make a profit, so they had nothing to rebuild with. Despite all their past hardships, the peasants still made it here, desperately seeking a solution. Van acknowledges his difficulties and vows to use his education and skills to help them. The village elders sit in oppressive silence and listen to the words of the young lord. First, a respected man named Espada steps forward and introduces himself. He is the lord's butler. The deputy of the night leader, Dai, also steps forward, swearing loyal service to Van. The peasants fall silent. It seems to them that the appearance of such important men is impossible, like a dream. Rhonda, filled with excitement, asked if they really intended to help the village. Van keeps his expectations in check and plainly says that he has no elemental combat magic. The peasants collapse to the ground in a funny wave of complete disappointment. He examines their simple wooden fence, noting how dangerously vulnerable it is to fire. His butler Espada confirms the magic-infused stone will remain strong for some time. Van confidently states that they will quickly build a strong stone wall. At night, Dee enthusiastically suggests to his people to dig a defensive ditch. Van continues strategic planning, ordering to prepare traps and ready ranged weapons. He proposes arming the untrained peasants with simple stones as projectiles. Addressing the crowd, he humbly promises to do everything possible for the village's development. He gathers them together, swearing that they will fight back and build a prosperous village together. At the moment of self-analysis, he is slightly shaken by shame, said like a politician. The peasant explains his current trouble. He is burdened by a 30 tax rate. Van decisively lowers the tax to 10, even offering to cover the deficit himself. The peasants freeze at his generosity because he considers it key to their stability. He contemplates the grim fact some peasants sell their children to pay off debts. A worried woman asks if they can call the knighthood for protection against robbers. Van explains such a great distance makes a call for help futile and too lengthy a matter. He lays out the harsh truth that the poster scene has a limited budget and lacks people for defense. Van returns to his butler Espad and makes a specific, seemingly impossible magical request. With a burst of incredible force, a huge stone wall erupts from the ground. Seeing the enormous new wall, Van tells his people, now he needs their help. He promises that by combining their strength, the village will endure and only become stronger. In the absence of housing, Van's group has to rest in their cart near the campfire. A good peasant named Rhonda offered his house, but they could not accept his help. The stack fire crackles brightly. Under the dark sky and around snow-covered mountains, Van notices that he has never complained about his gift of production magic before. He admits, as soon as he saw the peasants begin to doubt, he had never felt such bitterness. He knows that people believed, without elemental magic nothing can be achieved. He has already done everything to earn the trust of the villagers, but they still remain extremely distrustful. He decides to use his unique magic to protect and improve the village for everyone. The man points to the weak spot in their wall and declares that they need to go on the offensive. Van finds an unexpected and creative solution to his defensive problem: catapults. The senior Espada rejects this idea. Catapults are for sieges, not for defense. The village elder became interested in this idea and asked to explain how they work. The comrade explains his function. He throws large stones to destroy immobile targets. The Van Lachilniki suggests that they charge smaller stones to expand and make the strike zone more effective. Excited, the man proposes adding oil to the torch to get a hot result. Espada looks intently at Vojan and demands to know where he learned such advanced tactics. With a bright and proud smile, Van joyfully declares that the brilliant idea is his own. At his stunningly bold proclamation, the whole group suddenly freezes in oppressive, overwhelming silence. The scene transition blurs, and the narrative sharply shifts into a memory. He still recalls how he could not comprehend his own ability and trained tirelessly all the way. He clenches his fist determined to finally show his true, hidden abilities, his real strength. In the memories, the Ortho's party of adventurers reports that they drove the local bandits away. Ortho informs Van that his group will remain in this area to hunt for profit. In close-up, it is visible how the man slightly flinches while listening to the conversation. In the dense forest, the traveler Ortho announces a place suitable for their purposes. Till praises Ortho's sharp instinct, she can sense monsters during their long journey. She warns Lord Wonon, danger lies ahead and advises gathering firewood here. Soon she once again reflects that this is a real waste for such a tough traveler. Ven's eyes flash as he excitedly points to a fantastically looking tree. A more careful look shows the thick, ancient bark of the tree he chose. With a dull solid clunk, Van confidently and firmly presses his palm to the tree trunk. He begins to imagine exquisite furniture with incredibly precise details. Closing his eyes, he focuses his mind on every small, specific detail he can. His thoughts dive even deeper, imagining every single thread that makes up the tree. A new idea is born in his head, and he is confident that he can realize it. He imagines separating the fibers into even smaller threads and weaving them together, intertwining. A lightning flash ignites in his palms, and a brilliant burst of magical energy bursts forth from them. Till calls it amazing when he presents the newly assembled block made of wood fiber. He decides, for now, to load these strange new blocks into the cart. Or the batch returns confused by cubes instead of the expected firewood. Ortho expresses his surprise at how the unusual material he is holding feels. Realizing that it is both lighter and heavier than expected, he asks to test it. Van thoughtfully marvels at himself, how strong wood material can be. With a determined roar, Ordo brings his sword down with all his might. The blade descends with incredible force directly onto the strange wooden block. The block remains intact while the stone beneath it crumbles into pieces. Van simply says that Ortho completely could not cut through the block. His companions rush into battle like a whirlwind, slicing everything with hanging blades, amazed by the incredible strength of the materials. Ortho turns white from shock. He struck so hard that he broke a solid stone. He cannot believe it, and Van innocently asks what is stronger. Ortho laughs loudly and declares that this is a victory because they have obtained strong materials. Van examines the briquette and notes that it was a pleasant surprise. Nearby, a chariot wheel clinks and someone calls out, "Lord Van." A brief flash of movement means the scene is rapidly changing. Van sits in a disheveled cart, and around him are his numerous exquisite creations. His companion asks about mana, noting that production magic is incredibly expensive. He decides to test his monopoly by creating a sword in the Japanese style. As he sees the shiny blade, his eyes widen with complete admiration. Van presents his stunned comrade with a huge newly forged sword. Trembling with unrestrained joy, Kumsan accepts the gift and blushes to tears. He fervently declares, the sword will become his most precious family heirloom. Next, Van offers his maid Till a formidable scullador in battle axe. She stammers and drops everything, prompting him to ask if she doesn't like axes. He panics, thinking he misjudged her taste because of the loud, frightening design. Till Noozles passionately pokes with the weapon and declares that she was simply overwhelmed with emotions. He sincerely rejoices that she enjoys giving so much. Feeling a bit bad, he decides, later he will make a cute ornament for her. He marvels to notice that his crafting magic is actually quite useful. With pleasure, he comes to the realization, his magic turned out unexpectedly useful. Holding a small knife in his hand, he understands, his abilities are much greater than he imagined. A new chapter begins about an ambitious house construction project. The huge newly assembled stone wall is praised as an incredible monument. And look at our wonders, it is already taking shape, and in just half a day. Ortho calls Vina an anomaly, the one who acts beyond any common sense. Van is glad that he was placed on the same level as the wonderful family butler Esparta. The woman in glasses notes, a mage of such a level is truly a rarity. Van is glad that his Spartan suggested retiring with him. The woman sincerely wishes the old man to have a good time. A memory surfaces in Sparta, revealing his greatest joy in life. Sparta states that his greatest joy is seeing young Lord Van grow up. He pulls the protest Van away to an emergency lecture about his duties. Duskovs asks how they will strengthen the defense just by stacking stones. The counter-silence of Ruda, which solves everything, shows what his production magic is capable of. Inside, D expresses doubts about applying production magic for this. Another man agrees, Lord Vone incredible, and his magic. This will be of no use for this particular fortification project. Van believes he can heal the wooden gate just like the blocks. His only significant concern is the final weight of the new structure. He knows for vital protection an extremely large burden is crucial. With a loud bang, the huge carved gates instantly slam shut and settle into place. Van Ass decided to test his strength by striking it with a sword. Ortho agrees and prepares to strike the new gates with full force. He delivers a powerful blow with both hands directly onto the hard surface of the door. The strike ends with a dull, deafening clatter that echoes throughout the entire area. Ortho's Rivkum recoils from the gate, and his hands pulse from the recoil. He inspects the point of impact and reports. It only cracked a small dent. The crowd erupts in disbelief and begins to ask how the wood can be so incredibly hard. Van smiles, pleased that this proves it. He really can help protect them all. Later, Van lies in a narrow bed inside the group's road carriage. His body aches after sleeping in a cramped space without a proper sheet. Without running water, he constantly feels disgusting even though his clothes are clean. They continue to live outside the carriage even after arriving in the village. Suddenly, a clear thought strikes his head. He is a true nobleman. He recalls his poppy father's words. He said he had already begun to think like a true traveler. The next morning, he greets Till and comes in while they are cleaning. He sees how fatigue weighs on everyone and knows action must be taken now. With new firm determination, he declares that he intends to build a house for them. In the open field, he orders Kamzin to bring several wooden blocks, and the elder confirms that he can build his house in an open public space. Ven dreams of a future with harvest festivals and grand feasts for all. Feeling his boundless mana, he wonders if he can really build a house. He plans a separate, magnificent house for Dai and other knights. The scheme in his head grows as soon as he begins to sketch it. He draws adjoining columns with floors, walls, and finally a roof. He believes different styles of rooms are needed to please Sparta. Without glass, he replaces it with sliding panels and plans to find silica sand. In a moment, the luxurious mansion is ready, and he worries it is too large. Sparta objects claiming that it is too small, although the architecture is simply luxurious. Till and Compton praise its magic, saying that it is perfect for a ruling lord. Van barely nodded, still feeling deep doubt. He believes that strong offensive magic better protects people. The young maid fervently denies the thesis, insisting, a strong lord brings security. She states that she prefers to live in the city of Lord Vonog, rather than in Marks with Champus. Van lets it pass through him, and only then does a new understanding come to him when he looks at the situation from the people's perspective. The old butler explains, in peaceful times, people need a master who will make life better. The crowd reacts with reverence, swearing to follow their young lord anywhere. A large crowd of peasants and travelers wildly chat in amazement near the new estate. Van happily explains that he built a luxurious house with his production magic. Then he offers to build houses for everyone if they bring him more wood. A fox-like man with a ponytail growls with fierce determination, giving orders to his people to work. The subordinates respond sharply in a military manner, yes sir, and rush to carry out the order. Van watches the bustling hurry and bitterly regrets losing his carefree life. The men shout with determination, vowing to turn the knights into firewood. He quietly wonders, do all these people now plan to live in the village? A crowd of peasants approaches closer, and one man steps forward to speak. An old man tells a rumor, Van is building houses for the people. Van listens with a slightly tense, creaky smile, anticipating what will happen next. A flood of repair requests covers the broken doors and damaged houses. He feels pressure from inside. He thinks he should not have been so frank with D. He notices the peasants' fallen homes and admits that their condition is extremely bad. With a calm face, he agrees to fulfill their requests one by one. Van solemnly announces he will rebuild each home from scratch. The villagers burst into applause and joy, shouting Lord Van's name in unison and giving thanks. Their hands are raised together in a single gesture of support and joy. The village revival project starts with teams assigned to different tasks. Till and Kamsan are to watch over Vogan while he begins his work. Inside the structure, Van reveals his magic and starts erecting houses. He finds his rhythm, magically transforming old materials into new building bricks. The continuous flow of requests reminds him each time of his exhausting old office job. D watches stands captivated, praising the vast mana reserves in Van's and replenishing knowledge. The newly built houses impress and are duly honored for it. Van outlines his plan for the village, a neat checkerboard with a clear pattern. He explains that later he will rebuild each house to suit personal needs. Now the grateful peasants bow every time and give him the harvest as soon as he passes by. His next project is revealed, and anticipation hangs in the air. He announces the construction of a simple bathhouse near his residence. Till and Kamsen rejoice wildly as soon as they see the new bathhouse. Van admits he built it for himself but is glad they like it. A girl named Plurio uses water magic to fill the tub, heated by fire. Once Ven invites Van to bathe, and he freezes completely out of embarrassment. He shouts in shame that he is already over 30 years old inside. Till and Kamsen relax in the hot steam bath, laughing at his reaction. Later enters his huge empty office, realizing he missed out. He quickly returns to work and decides to make beds for everyone. A bed frame appears, and he decides to use straw to craft futons. Exhausted, he falls onto the new bed and freezes, marveling at how soft and fluffy it is. He drifts into sleep, wishing everyone good night. The next morning begins with a close-up of an appetizing dish. Van bites into his breakfast and smiles, glowing from how delicious it is. Till is happy that she likes it and admits she was worried about their ingredients. He recalls simple happiness waking up and savoring a breakfast that just melts in the mouth. He feels calm and joyful, especially when sharing this moment with dear Till. His happy mood breaks when he considers that they need a regular income. Esparta confirms his fears. Traders almost never visit this remote village. The weight of this new economic reality crashes down on Ven, covering him with hopeless sadness. Van interrupts his spartous and serious lecture to point out that this crimin has a mustache. Exhausted, he suggests postponing broader and more complex issues for now. He suggests they first focus on strengthening the village's defense. Sparta reminds him that they don't even have basic seasonings and no major luxuries. Failure disappeared in a dramatic panic explosion of distrust. The background texture panel moves to the next stage of planning. Van acknowledges that they need to start some form of industry. He demands immediate proposals on what the village can sell. 2 ideas were proposed and immediately dismissed because they don't scale. Sparta considers agriculture, but still concludes that it won't bring stable profit. The brainstorming hits a dead end. The group falls silent. Sparta sighs, irritated, mutters that there must be an asterisk. Something with an asterisk and they can do it. The view of the treetops shifts the scene to the outdoor space. An invisible voice reflects on how much people love their Lord Van. The frail scout Kuzala explains that the peasants guard their new weapon like a treasure. Van says that they must understand the effectiveness of their tools to have protection. Almost until now, while they nervously looked around, clutching their own formidable weapons. Kuzala confidently states that he has a solution for the demonstration. He shows a formidable orcish knight shield and boasts that it withstands everything. Kamsen hesitates, but she is encouraged and she strikes the shield with all her might. He lowers the sword and on the strike, a dull clang resounds. Kuzala laughs, understanding the hesitation, but insists on a full test at full strength. Kamsen and von Staren open their eyes wide in shocked incomprehension. Till is equally stunned by the unexpected result. Kuzala froze in shock, standing with his mouth agape, looking at the broken shield. He saw it and in frantic screams and disbelief, shouted that the shield was just made. In close-up, a clean cut shows the full power of the wooden blade. Van calmly takes a step forward and assures everyone that he can easily fix the shield. A flash of magical energy envelops both halves, and they become whole again. As the traveler arrives, the newcomer throws down and asks what all the commotion is about. Ortho suggests selling Ortho. The group just brought it back. He explains that they came across rare ore in a monster-infested forest and did not venture deep. He unloads the haul, and piles of ore, iron, copper, and silver unfold before him. Proudly, he raises a large, shimmering crystalline rock to examine it. Van's eyes flash with excitement. He immediately recognizes it as Mithra lore. He is thrilled and impressed. Such a valuable resource was found in the forest. Orthka carefully considers why ore remained undiscovered for so long. Van concludes that knights who cannot see ore are those lacking talent. In their lands, there are only explorers. He concludes that the wealth of resources is buried near the foot of the mountains. Van decides to start with experiments on iron ore. He explains his unique purification process and creates a small cube of pure iron. Kuzala's eyes flash as he impatiently asks Van to make him a sword. Ortha and the companion ponder why Kuzala is so obsessed with swords. Van readily agrees and promises to provide the weapon as thanks for the ore. He begins the forging process, focusing on making the edges unacceptably sharp. A bright flash of light reveals a magnificent and exquisitely decorated longsword. He reflects on how quickly he mastered the subtle process of weapon making. To celebrate his first client, Van gifts the ornate longsword. The warrior is completely overwhelmed by the majesty and intimidating presence of the sword. Van playfully refuses to touch the precious sword, promising that there will be another soon. Satisfied with the work, he hands Kemsun a newly made short sword. The scene was filled with pure, boundless joy when she was given the beautiful weapon. The crowd of adventurers wildly rushes forward, impatiently demanding their own custom weapons. The woman in glasses suggests that the newly discovered aura might prove valuable. Esparta, the advisor, notes how incredibly rare it is to find metal ore in the forest. This find contradicts the usual mountainous locations where ora are typically found. Esparta notes that although iron dust is known, encountering its solid or unusual variety is very difficult. He holds to the assumption, the exception is golems. They are often found near dungeons. A detail from the leg of a golem emphasizes this shocking assumption. The very thought of a nearby dungeon strikingly confuses one of the travelers. The hikers confirm that they found no remains of a golem, therefore, it is ancient. They believe they can get as close to the dungeon as possible because the area is poorly mapped. Esparta looks at his young lord with a stern, focused face. Van acknowledges that the discovery of the dungeon will fundamentally change their situation. Despite the risks, Van's determined expression hints at ambition. The story says that the dungeon is an endless repository of resources and treasures. Guild members must report on the dungeon, then new bases are established. A small illustration emphasizes the important role of the Travelers Guild. For travelers, finding a new dungeon is a glorious and profitable acquisition. A transitional panel marks a change in the discussion. Van worries that his small village will not be able to cope with the mass arrival of people. His advisor agrees, citing a lack of equipment and food warehouses. Ortho advises them to avoid the search because they fear attacks from foreign speculators. One woman dismisses the idea of a secret expedition as a senseless risk. They show that their subscribers can solve the capacity problem using Van's magic. Van explains his plan, first develop the village to prevent interference. The group agrees to focus on searching for the dungeon and gathering resources. He feels grateful for their dedication and decides to repay them in kind. He understands that the dungeon is a vital asset for any nobleman. He knows any discovery he makes will be taken from his alienated family. It manifests as a powerful, brilliant flash of magical energy. He works wonders with tireless effort, yet still holds on to what is necessary. He acknowledges his exhaustion, but vows to finish the important task first. He considers the shortage of skilled workers needed for production. He plans to accumulate weapons and armor for the village's self-defense. The massive outer defensive wall surrounding the village is almost completed. He explains that with the help of magic, he fuses stones into a substance similar to concrete. He stands on the top of the newly built wall, performing his impressive work. A bright flash illusion of magic shows a power capable of leveling even a wall. He creates mighty billisties, enhancing them with materials from magical beasts. For the operator's protection, he attaches a large shield to each weapon. He builds watchtowers and places even more ballistae on the roofs. His maid sets out to prepare food, going down to his comrade Kamsin. He finds Kamsan and notes his diligent, persistent work. Noticing the scene Kaman's silence, he cautiously asks what is on his mind. Kamshana expresses his admiration and with hurricane force advances the village's transformation. Van modestly downplays his role and asks Thompson about his own goals. Kumston froze, pondering this deep question before answering. With fervent conviction, Kemsun proclaims, his life goal is to protect Van. Van was completely taken aback by the force of his patron's statement. He tells Soam not to push himself but sincerely thanks him. He reflects on how openly and honestly Compton dedicates himself to him. The panel transition from the story moves the plot to the next scene. Van and his followers review their work, satisfied with its new strength. The completed watchtower stands as a mighty symbol of their progress. His constant caretakers declare that the village is now a small, impregnable fortress. A detail of the deep moat surrounding the fortress is shown. D suggests that Van's power could elevate him to a high position. Esparta sharply rejects this idea, referring to the martial values of the nobility. Depp insists passionately that Van can be stronger than anyone. Others panic, arguing. They say the power of prohibition is for protection, not for conquest. Van quietly listens to the heated dispute about the nature of war. He wisely says that he must compete with the abilities he has. His followers are silently stunned by his mature and wise outlook. His simple but profound wisdom truly touches his faithful servants. The warm tension is suddenly broken by an unexpected burst of laughter. Den laughs loudly, declaring his unwavering faith in Van's great potential. When the dispute subsided, Van quickly returns to his numerous projects. The new moat just dug is still empty, waiting for water to fill it. He must be on the defense, and this is about the aesthetic appeal of the filled moat. He considers practical needs to reinforce the moat and provide water. He understands that their current methods of water collection cannot last forever. His thoughts scatter from the frantic bustling appearance of the messenger, who stomps forward wildly. The messenger reports that bandits are approaching, and Van orders everyone to head to safety. He authoritatively commands to close the gate on the drawbridge. He urgently asks to count everyone still outside the walls. He is pierced by how quickly the peasants have learned to trust him. He notices that some peasants are still frightened by the battle. He recalls their palpable fear after the previous clash with the enemies. He admits his own fear, but understands that he must appear strong to them. He stealthily sits on the road to lead his frightened people into the impending battle. The peasants stand firm as tempered steel and listen to their lord with unwavering determination. The man's hand clenches into a tight, strong fist of resolve. The peasants roar in support, vowing to fight shoulder to shoulder with him. A tense facial expression turns into a warm and grateful smile. He immediately starts searching with his voice and shouting tactical orders to his new soldiers. The peasants respond respectfully as he continues to direct them where to take their posts. He rushed up the stone stairs to get a better view. His path is suddenly and silently blocked, and so is his maid. He immediately tells her that he needs to move to the front line. A man named D orders Till to lead her people on a reconnaissance mission. Van watches as the confident warrior takes tactical control of the situation. D cracklingly confident in himself, his chest swollen with boundless faith in his own abilities. He recalls his past where he always won, even though he faced impossible odds. His reputation rests on impeccable selection of combat formations and the skill of his soldiers. He confidently states that his leadership yields better results than anyone else. A knight in shining armor D reveals his decision to obey the orders of Lord Van. The spirit sensed in the young lord's unpredictable behavior now he is ready to risk his life. Filled with manic joy, he declares that the events to unfold will be truly interesting. From the watchtower, he eagerly awaits the battle and proclaims that it will be historic. He pats the young scout on the back and praises him for his ability to spot bandits from afar. From the height of his observation post, the approaching group looks as if they are running in panic. D counts their numbers from 50 to 100, but they are still several hundred meters away. He notices that their behavior is strange. They are rushing at full speed. Lord Van calmly predicts they will most likely collapse from exhaustion before they even arrive. The scout voices a chilling thought: what if someone is chasing them? Panic erupts. The scout shouts that he just saw a trail. D questions the report and asks if everyone in the village has perfect eyesight. From below in the field of vision bursts a gigantic tail, marked by a massive scaly body and instantly crowned with sharp spikes. The real threat is revealed by a cry of alarm: an armored lizard. Dua gently reports to Van that a horde of armored lizards is chasing the bandits. With grim malice he notes, ordinary weapons against their thick skin are absolutely useless. The advisor remarks, magic works but they have only two specialties. He explains knights could aim at weak spots in the belly, but the peasants lacked this skill. He worried about how much longer the defenseless peasants would hold out against the powerful claws of this creature. When panic begins to rise, Lord Van's voice sharply cuts through the tension. He gives a clear command to switch ballistic ammunition to heavy iron bolts. D grabs a bolt, thinking its weight cannot match the lizard's tough defense. A tremor of doubt runs through his eyes as he assesses this formidable situation. He hesitated for a moment, weighing chances that seemed impossible. When he prepares, a thought of inevitable defeat flashes in his mind for a moment. His determination grows stronger. He will follow Lord Van's orders without any objections. As soon as the bandits shout for help, colossal lizards thunderously converge on them. D reports a huge swarm, 40-80 lizards, an unconquered horde. He counts very sluggishly. Their ranks will thin out as prey and the bandits will fall. Lord Von expresses sympathy for the robbers who are used as forced bait. D laughs loudly, sincerely apologizing for his cruel blunder in a tense situation. He explains that lightness is needed to relieve tension before the decisive battle. Van gives the next order. The teams are told to shoot when the lizards are aligned. He encourages the men, promising to bring his knights for the final strike. He roars a call and incites the defenders, promising a feast of fire-roasted lizard. The bandits tremble and gasp. Their desperate, exhausting escape approaches a brutal finale. Giant lizards flew into the ranks and smashed them with a roar, and the bodies flew into the air. The fleeing bandit lets out a scream full of fear as the monsters launch their attack. The horde descends on the people, its huge jaws snap shut with deadly force. The bandits are overwhelmed and they perish in a brutal, chaotic slaughter, torn apart and devoured. From the wall, the defender announces that the ballista is ready to fire. The heavy siege weapon mechanism grinds until it reaches its final locking position. A huge iron bolt is loaded into the weapon. Its sharp tip gleams as if freshly sharpened. Commander grimly notes, with such a large target, missing will be difficult. From the weapon positions, he accurately aims at the approaching horde. The loading mechanism cuts and clicks as it prepares to release its charge. With a dull crack, the command to fire echoes through the wall. Massive bolts tear through the air at a wildly whistling speed. The downpour strikes directly into the front rows of the lizard pack with devastating force. One bolt finds its target with bloody accuracy, even piercing a lizard's eye. The commander freezes in shock, trying to comprehend whether the spear somehow disappeared after the strike. The lizards are thrown into chaos. They stumble and fall, knocked down by an invisible force. Bloody splashes scatter from the creatures as the powerful projectiles find their targets. The commander realizes in horror that the bolts are piercing through the first line. A more attentive look shows a bolt that cleanly sliced through the armored leg of a lizard. He understood that the bolts stopped only when they hit the lizards behind the first row. He notes, despite the fact that the volley was unprecedented, it did not wipe out many of them. Lord Van is praised for creating such a crazy weapon, and he confirms that it worked successfully. The peasants shout with delight, amazed that a single volley fell and struck 10 armored lizards. De roars, demanding more bolts, and realizes that they have only one iron bolt per projectile for each ballista. For now, he makes an unexpected call to take up wooden spears. He encourages the defenders and orders, prepare the rest of the bolts and wooden spears. The strategist notes, success has raised morale, so the second volley was more accurate. The second volley, the village's most powerful attack, breaks the silence with a scream. The commander watches as the wooden spear he personally launched shatters into pieces from the impact. To his surprise, the spear still managed to kill the creature instantly. He realizes the wooden spear pierced the hard skin so deeply that death is inevitable. With renewed firmness, he orders everyone to take wooden spears. His clear command to hit spreads through the bastions. An unrelenting barrage falls, and at the last loud order, open fire. The valley below turned into a graveyard, dozens of dead lizards scattered everywhere. De Roers achieved a triumphant victory, proclaiming it for the entire village. He announces that all the armored lizards are dead, and their threat is extinguished. The peasants erupt with a loud, joyful shout of relief and celebration. D reports to Commander Stradil, shocked that they defeated only 60 spears and without any losses. Stradil reflects on the victory and is proud of how much Lord Van has grown. Van is joyfully welcomed by his comrades. The feeling of victory seems almost unbelievable. De proudly shows the spoils of war and says, "Thank you for your efforts." Van looks at the sea of dead dinosaurs and still cannot recover from the incredible sight. Quietly admits that he still cannot believe they really won that battle. D laughs loudly, celebrating his victory thanks to the incredible ballistics of Van's. He is amazed at how even wooden spears pierce the lizard's scales as if they were metal. He pats Van on the back and declares that the village would have been lost without them. During the celebrations, Van's expression instantly changes. Suddenly a thought occurs. He remembers their other enemy, the robbers who are still kept tied up below. They recall those approximately 30 bandits who were captured during that chaos. He leans over the wall and orders his men to tie the soaked bandits together. He reminds the robbers they have just seen with their own eyes the true power of the village. Two frightened robbers can only stammeringly nod, agreeing with his orders. The captured robbers brought before the village begged them for their lives. They begged to be put to work, fearing they would be enslaved or hanged. The old village elder reminds everyone of the terrible harm these people have already caused. A young villager shouts at a robber in frenzy and exposes his parents died because of them. Seeking to vent his rage, he raises a bottle to strike and lay down the bandit. Lord Van gently stops his hand and advises not to dirty their hands as they did then. Van asked for permission to take on resolving the situation further. The peasant, when his anger subsides and turns into sadness, agrees to allow him. Van informs the bandits that when the carriers arrive, they will be taken away. He states that until then they will help exactly the village they attacked. After the battle begins, Van orders his men to start processing the remains of beast carcasses. From the fortress wall comes a voice giving precise orders regarding the processing of the killed beasts. Under exhausted eyes, a tired worker acknowledges the orders among the giant carcasses. And marvel adventures, thanks to which the loot from this single week-long journey secured his future. His companion exclaims in amazement that they defeated these fierce monsters so easily. Next to them, young Lord Van and the traveler Orda burst into triumphant laughter. The reality of this monumental work is this: they process only a few corpses per day. Ortho understands. They must help immediately before the valuable materials start to spoil and rot. From the next day, both travelers and peasants all participate in the great carving event. Van proudly declares that he personally forged new sharp wooden knives specifically for this work. After 3 long days of continuous work, the great carving event finally comes to an end. Now near the village gate stand 2 huge piles, one of materials, the other of scraps. That evening Vantage covers the village, announcing a festive banquet dinner with all the meat. He raises a large wooden cup and calls to celebrate their huge victory. The village square explodes with a joyful festival of gluttony, the roar of applause, and shouts in honor of their lord. Young Van, flushed with excitement, is already reaching to bite from the meat skewer. Ordo praises the armored lizard meat, noting the crispy outer crust and juicy interior. They talk about the high price of the meat and complain about wastefulness, because so much is there yet it still goes to waste. Kumps notes the beast's bones are as sharp as the weapons Van provided. His face suddenly hardens. He abruptly demands to know where his own sword is. The daredevil proudly shows his new weapon, praising its incredible sharpness. The woman in glasses adds that her light, sharp blade is a tremendous help. Marvel the pinnacle of design, custom made by Van in mere minutes. This praise ignites a fierce passion and the traveler's squad arrives in a crowd. Everyone wants custom-forged swords. When the first step appears soon, everything looks as if the equipment for low retainers is already at hand, just as soon as finances are sorted out. Choking on demands, Van abruptly breaks free from the persistent crowd. He offers meat to the peasant and says that everyone has worked hard for him. The peasants continue to chatter, thank him, and ask if they should bring him more. The scene shifts to a quieter corner of the ongoing festival. 2 former bandits recall how strange, yet impressive Lord Van is. One clenches his fist, grateful that Van's influence prevented him from returning to crime. His face freezes with new determination for the future. For the memory of his late family, he vows to make the village a better place. But for now, they decide to simply enjoy the meat from the banquet of high quality. Somewhere there, the Van's retainers hold a shared drink. They have no idea that they will one day laugh together at the table. The woman wonders if there will be at least someone among the other nobles who will agree to celebrate with them. A stern-looking man quietly nods, supporting her sincere feeling. The maid calls it Van's charm, while Sparta frets over how nobility should behave. The maid's eyes flash as soon as she senses even greater achievements lie ahead. Against the backdrop of the celebration, Ortho starts calculating what profit can be snatched from the spoils. He explains if the meat rots, the value sharply drops, a realistic consequence. His latest calculation, over 300 gold lives, completely shocked young Van. The number explodes in his head, a staggering 300 million yen. Sparta approaches and congratulates Van on his victory and his hard work. The butler's face becomes stern as he addresses the fruits of Van's labor. He announces a strict rule: 50 tax on every collection over 100 gold. The news cuts into Van Hard's thoughts. He completely forgot about the tax system of this world. Van asks if they can hide the haul, but the Spartan confirms it is impossible to conceal. He fell into decline due to the downturns, bitterly mourning the loss of half of his imaginary wealth. As part of what the state considers a real problem, the advances in the village have now become public property. Van agrees, keeping his success a secret will be incredibly difficult. However, his loyal butler reveals they still have a few options. The young lord raises his gaze, with a stern expression on his face as he waits for an explanation. Sparta admits that he is hinting at leading the Marquis astray, a grave act of betrayal. This means that the butler proposes to hide the truth from his longtime lordship. He chooses to protect the future of Van's, placing it above his own unbreakable loyalty. Someone's old version of the vision says they must report the events to his brother, Lord Mershaw. The young man immediately grasps the cunning to attribute the victory to his brother. Their plan is to give credit to the mercenaries, so that his brother finally achieves the necessary political victory. Van agrees because he wants to thank Mercia for his past help in the battle for the succession. He raises his gaze to his faithful butler and weighs the burden of the decision. He praises his Spartus plan, calling it a wonderful proposal. The next morning, the peasants cheerfully greet their lord with joyful good mornings. The delighted woman even offers marriage, and the trucks, made to the very end, shudder and recoil, till playfully takes Van by the hand and teases him for wanting attention. The scene breathes warmth and the same familiarity that is born in the village. The peasants watch the charming spectacle as the lord and his maid walk side by side. With a quiet sound of agreement, Van gently lets go of her hand. Embarrassed, he declares his dignity as a lord, but up to the questions, he begins to doubt his seriousness. He is fighting with himself inside, to hold a sweet moment and at the same time maintain dignity. An anxious thought sneaks into his head, once a quiet maybe someday she will leave him. He quickly comes to the conclusion, her happiness must always come first. He imagines a future where she can find someone who interests her. Till calms him down, stating that her passionate desire is to always be by his side. The moment is filled with a deep, poignant feeling. Her words make Van jump from his place. He firmly grasps her hands with both of his. Their intimate moment is interrupted by a guard who urgently calls Lord Van. From the walls, the guard reports, merchant peddlers are approaching the village. Van Stiers looks closely and identifies the approaching merchants Bella and Rango. The caravan is already so far away that it is barely visible on the horizon, a whole line of dots. His companions are impressed by his sharp eyesight. They themselves cannot see so clearly. Confidently declares that they are not bandits and overrides the guard's warnings. He explains his strategic thinking, considering the possibility of a hidden threat. As a precaution, he sends Till to enter fetch Ortho. The coachman's caravan travels far. Its passengers groan about their troubles. Bell explains how the broken carriage will cost them a fortune and ruin their product. His brother Ringo sobs into the void, breaking into tears over their colossal debt and bleak prospects. Their guard asks if that ahead is the same city from nothing they talked about. They are stunned to see a mighty fortress instead of an ordinary village. Bell agrees it impresses much more than he expected. A voice sounded from the wall. It calls them and Rango wonders if they took the wrong turn. Bell recognizes the voice and tells his brother that it is the fourth son of the Marquis. Van formally demands that they state their names, company, and employer. One of the guards confirms Van's identity, mentioning his fame in the city. Rengo tries to reconcile the rumors about Van's exile with this reality. Bell officially introduces his party from the Merry Chamber of Commerce. Van asks Ortho if he knows them, then who will confirm that they have already met in the guild. After their identity is confirmed, Van allows them to enter the village. Merchants watch and freeze in surprise. They are warmly welcomed. The man apologizes for being late, crossing the threshold and stepping onto the village street itself. Van gives a bright, disarming smile and solemnly introduces himself again. A young blonde lord with curly hair greets the approaching group of merchants with a polite smile. His face becomes serious as he prepares to get down to business with them. He immediately asks if the newly arrived merchant sells materials from armored lizards. The shopkeepers shudder with surprise and ask if he really defeated one of those terrifying creatures. Two brothers celebrate sudden luck, thanking God for valuable materials. He leads them to the warehouse, but their enthusiasm is shattered by overwhelming silence. The merchants freeze in shock and cannot believe their eyes. They ask if he fought a monster, a giant lizard 30 meters long. The young lord calmly explains that he defeated 40 lizards and captured about 30 bandits. One brother is still recovering from the numbers, while the other is already starting to calculate logistics. Bill confirms that they can handle the deal within a month and asks if Van can wait. Noticing the meat, Belle offers to buy it so it doesn't go to waste. She asks if the poor neighboring village can even afford such expensive meat. Belle explained that the village is on the brink of starvation and they asked him to help. He asked if he could distribute the meat for free to give them relief. Van smiles, seeing the true nature of the merchant, offers the meat for free. The merchant freezes. The boy's intuition impresses him, and he realizes that he is far more worthy than the rumors suggest. As a sign of compensation, Bell generously offers to cover the expenses for capturing the bandits. Thanking him, Van promises a deal that the merchant will not regret during their next visit. He offers a future deal on high-quality furniture and leaves the merchant completely astonished. Barely smiling, Van asks if he brought along any skilled craftsmen. Later, Balon guards marvel, captivated by Van's weapon craftsmanship. Bell admits that he cannot judge their effectiveness, but their artistic value is undeniable. His guard demonstrates how incredibly sharp the knife is. It cuts through the thick armored skin of a lizard. The guard confirms the material is indeed the same surprisingly durable armored lizard skin. The blade slices through the skin with a clean whistle, no resistance at all. The guards are impressed by the sharpness of the iron sword and loudly demand to buy one for themselves. Bill states that the weapon's specifications are extraordinary and agrees to buy it at the asking price. Van admits that he cannot take everything and says they will come back for it later. The deal is concluded, a new partnership is born over a crate of quality weapons. From the high point it is visible. Van walks together with two merchants through a neat village. That night, the merchants look down from the balcony onto the streets of Wellet village. Savoring roasted meat, Bell declares settled in the village it is truly exciting and pleasant. Inside, they discuss matters. They propose expanding the team and coming twice a month. Van agrees and notes that there is enough food and drinks critically important for boosting morale. Then the traders awkwardly start a conversation about advertising their new weapons. Van wisely guesses, the brothers strategically plan to monopolize his market. A small, funny merchant shows his current limited trade route. The brothers understand. They will have to rethink the entire business structure starting with advertising. Their excitement collapses into panic as they begin to figure out how to accomplish such colossal work at all. With a gentle smile, Van offers a revolutionary solution to organize a permanent warehouse. He explains that they can hire locals to manage their business. Gasping with excitement, the brothers nod energetically when Van offers to build them a house. Van considers the plan and realizes. He saves him time and gives the village its first store. Belle decides to stay in the village until the new store is fully set up. A small hand reaches out and grabs a bigger one. This is what their new deal looks like. The merchant watches him go with a confident smile, showing that he is eager to work together. Van shakes his hand firmly, declaring that the negotiations are a big and loud victory. The covered wagon stands ready, and this means the start of the next stage of their plan. A new chapter begins. Rango waves goodbye and sets off to convince his company. Van also sent a letter to his brother Mercia, attributing their achievements to him. After Rango leaves, Belle stands stunned before the huge newly built structure. Van explains the plan and Belle, stammering, insists that he just described his vision. The cook confesses she did not believe the tales about Van's power until this happened. A small grateful figure sincerely thanks Van. The issue with the shop has already been resolved. That afternoon, the company heads to the river, making their way through thickets, along a path that rustles underfoot. Van Til and Kumsan walk side by side until Van asked if he was tired from the journey. Kumsan takes the lead, easily clearing the overgrown path with his blade. He moves skillfully, his swords flash as he cuts through the thickets in one sweep. Van is initially impressed by the noble act of his companions. They cleared the way. But his desire to stay alert is immediately crushed by his own fatigue. The exhausting path through the wild thickets takes them a whole hour. Finally, they reach a wide, clear river, the place they are heading to for the new project. A powerful strike and the ground explodes as Van begins construction. In an instant, huge trenches are ruthlessly cut from the earth, as if by a blow. Van announces the start of construction of the new waterway channel. Major Sparta uses his magic to instantly dig several meters of earth. While the sport stops, Group D and Kumsan continues to dig manually. Van follows them, using his own production magic to reinforce the new walls. Esparta sobs through the effort, and his seemingly endless manasters come to a halt. Instead, the 40-year-old D laughs loudly, and his physical energy overflows. During the break, Til remarks on the colossal scale of the work. Van finds true satisfaction in this and works together with others, moving toward a common goal. After 8 hours, a worker shouts that the village is already visible. Although their pace still holds, Van Yarns calls out work for the day is stopped. One of the workers questions the decision, believing he can finish in a few hours. Van points to the laborers from the manufacturing workshop, who are already completely exhausted and trembling from fatigue. D, as before, is full of energy and says that this is a great way to build muscles. Van froze with surprise. The old man still has more than enough strength after hard work. He internally concludes that D is frightening, yet impressive, a senseless idiot. The next day, the waterway miraculously stretches all the way to the village. Van officially announces the completion of the waterway, thanking everyone for the hard work. The construction crew shines with pride, acknowledging their incredible southern achievement. Van asks his companion Bella if he is ready to move on to the next step. With a cry of admiration, Van reveals his strength. He tears the earth, and a curse occurs. The water majestically rushes through the canal, and the whole team bursts into joyful shouts. Van immediately plans his next project, a structure that will filter boiled drinking water. A focused young man with sparkling eyes greedily announces the plan for the establishment. Van asks the young man quietly and lowly if he is interested in the construction project. A bashful blush confirms his interest. He speaks directly about his curiosity regarding this structure. Van understands that Lo seems to have a passion for construction and notices his excitement. He calls Lo to work on this together, and Lo agrees, beaming with enthusiasm. A detailed diagram shows their ambitious plan for the water purification system. They discuss logistics and plan to use magic crystals to ignite the boilers effortlessly. Their planning is interrupted by a man running in. He shouts that the watercourse is already full. Van is impressed by how quickly the channel filled with clear, sparkling water. Esparta praises his attentiveness before asking about the risk of overflow during floods. He outlines standards and civil engineering solutions, including the expansion of the waterway. As Sparta hints, embankments need to be built to contain areas that are frequently flooded. He notes without an outlet the water has nowhere to go, so a reservoir is needed. Van suggests either circulating the water back or digging a lake outside the village. Espart thoughtfully decides to build a lake, because he considers it the best solution for water in the long term. Van agrees to the ambitious plan, but only on the condition that they properly calculate the probable flooding. They decide to build a new lake 200 meters behind the main village. A simple map shows the village layout in relation to the new water channel. The whole team works tirelessly to complete the grand project before the start of the rainy season. In an incredible engineering feat, the huge new lake was completed in 3 days. Looking at the sparkling water, Van is already thinking about adding a sluice gate in the future. He beams with pure joy, thrilled that he was able to secure so much clean water for his people. The calm chirping of birds signals the quiet, gradual approach of early morning. With an empty gaze, Van suddenly wakes from a deep sleep in the pre-dawn hours. His maid, Till, rushed into the room apologizing for waking him, while sudden panic arose in the village. She quickly explains that Dee and Esparta have already rushed to the scene of the commotion. Till shows this new lake is the one the villagers called Lake Van. Van is completely stunned by this news and tries to find out where the unexpected name came from. She explains that it was named after his great work so future generations could see it. He learns that the village is now also called Van Village, a shameful, unwanted label. A young follower named Lu calls out loudly, begging Lord Van not to leave him behind alone. The three decisively stride towards the hustle, their pace fast and stubborn. Noid decided to build a discreet back entrance to avoid all this new attention. Approaching the lake, the villager points to a strange figure far out in the water. Van is completely confused when a mysterious spectacle emerges from the quiet surface of the lake. A mystical creature with blue hair, said to live in thickets and forest rivers, appears. It is the mythical Apkallu, half-human, half-fish, a creature Sparta calls a rare sight. The gaze of Apkallu is fixed on the shore where the whole village has gathered to watch her. Van takes a step forward, notices her youth, and asks the name of the mysterious girl. Confident that food is the key to friendship, he sends his servants for meat and fruit. The peasants line up in a crowd and watch with bated breath, swallowing nervously as if at a strange painting. The stern-looking warrior D watches the creature intently and warily. Another traveler, Ortho, holds a gloomy and cautious gaze on the tense situation. Driven by the smell of food, she faints from horror, gets up, and asks if she can eat this. With the surprised exclamation Van surprise, she spoke and the frightened silent being shuddered. She dashes away with incredible speed and Van calls her back. Cautiously resurfacing, she agrees to try the meat wagon he gently offers her on the shore. Thinking about food and chewing slowly, her large curious eyes are fixed on the boy. She continues to eat the meat, staring intently at Van from the water's edge. Dee watches the strange interaction, his face serious and expressionless while he stands guard. Ortho, with a mutilated, gloomy face, does not take his vigilant gaze off the entire scene. Apkallu asks who hunted the armored lizard, the meat of which she is now eating. Ortho, the first to proudly give all the laurels to his young Lord Van. Espart calmly confirms the story, and thereby triples the claim that Lord Vogan was truly responsible. Clearly and without enthusiasm joins in, proudly declaring that it was all a heroic deed of Lord Van. The peasants nod together in unison, ignoring the frantic attempts of the wagoners to snatch glory for themselves. Van resigns himself to the fact that in the eyes of his people he is a hero. Appendix Keller listens to this conversation. Her gaze is fixed on him and now filled with new understanding. She, focusing on what she heard, begins to rustle, rummaging in a small pouch on the side. A wonderful silence covers the lake, and a small splash cuts through this calm atmosphere. Van sat on the shore and had no idea what that strange, quiet gathering meant. The next morning his door burst open with a bang. The maid in panic screams his name. She apologizes and explains that the peasants are in panic because of some raid that is about to arrive. Still half asleep and groggy after sleep, Van processes the alarming news about the attack on the village. Suddenly changing, he realizes the enemy has already reached the main regime. An irritated expression hardens on his face. The sleep is interrupted again. Declaring his actions unforgivable, he rushed away to meet the new alarming challenge head-on. Beneath him, his defenders are already deploying giant ballistae, ready for intense battle. In the regime, a sea of figures, a silent aquatic invasion. Two of Van's companions lined up for battle and are closely watching the strange newcomers. The defenders on the wall are tense, hands on weapons. They prepare for slaughter. Van understands the aliens are not lizards. They are those mythical Apkallu about whom it was said earlier. He notes that unlike yesterday, this group includes people of all ages and genders. A mighty man with a crown rises and Apkallu appears, demanding to speak directly with the boy. Under the gaze of the leader, terrifying and tense, Van suddenly feels the chill of fear. Filled with fear, he asks his strongest comrades to stay close to support him. Ortho excitedly explains that the Halu app provides rare and valuable trade materials. He impatiently asked for permission to take a closer look at potential new clients. The team stands on the wall, looking at the app color leader in the water below. The leader admits that he came because Van fed his daughter the day before. He also says that he heard Van was the one who defeated the armored lizard. Van's confirmation spreads a wave of whispers through the gathered apkalacron. His companions watch as the crowd questions whether he is a powerful mage or has strong allies. The leader declares that he recognizes the young boy as a true hero. Then he makes a stunning proposal. Van and his daughter Lotta Priora will marry. Van is completely stunned by the unexpected and sudden marriage proposal. He panics in his head, unable to grasp the meaning of this strange arrangement. His thoughts race: who is Lotta Prior and what does this marriage agreement even mean? A feeling of Russian confusion and complete shock after the proposal spreads in the air. Ladevesta introduces herself and praises the beauty and future potential of her daughter. Van notices that girl she is happily playing with friends in the water. He doubts the talks about marriage, realizing that she is just an uninformed child. Ladevesta tells about the misfortune of her clan. On the river he lost many friends, they were crushed by armored lizards. He admits his desire to secure the home and find a strong man for his daughter. Van cuts through the politics, promising to protect them regardless of any marriage. Many Esters took everything as a question. Can his people live in fashion, calling Van their son? Then he politely asks them to move to the back lake, so as not to scare the visitors. Van is stunned. He processes that Lotta Vesta just called him her son. He is desperately trying to deny the marriage as soon as Apkalo begin to leave. Lotta waved to Priori, cheerfully calling him hubby, and he fiercely denied it. Ordo persistently begs D to get rare materials for his shop from their new allies. A Spartan notes what great luck it is to have good relations with the Kalu app. He is gnawed by how others will perceive this strange engagement with Apkala. Till is completely confused, not knowing how to react to her lord's new bride. The group is worried about possible quarrels, while Kalu plays joyfully downstairs. The children's epicelo splashes and laughter settled in the new home perfectly relaxed. Exhausted, Van resigns himself to the new role as their lord and protector. He is building two large structures resembling boathouses as a place to rest. Apkalo is delighted with their new homes and immediately asks for more space. Van is glad they like the designand notes that for Scuteria he is a stranger. Sparta praises Van's quick grasp of foreign concepts while they plan their next project. Later in Opkalu, villagers begin trading vegetables and meat among themselves. The Kalu app proved reliable. Miners regularly delivered ore to the village store using it. Van is happy to see the two communities coming closer and having fun together. They propose a new ambitious plan, another stronger defensive wall for the village. D suggests to build a large fortification one that can accommodate 10,000 residents. He insists that a large rampart is more effective. It requires less perimeter guarding. Van expresses doubt and wonders if there will really be so many people who will truly move to such a remote place. Insisting that they plan ahead, D warns, expanding later will be more difficult. He even jokes that their stubborn companion, Esparta, is an obstacle they need to prepare for. Van is stunned by the proposed scale, hearing about guild bases 600 meters high. Deadvises with a modified wall ready for full-scale deployment later. With a new idea proposed by Van, they should reconsider the square shape of the fortress. It means that round fortresses are weak against magic, so square ones became the standard. Then Van makes a sketch of his revolutionary project, a magnificent star-shaped fortress. He explains that the 6 outer triangles will function as independent, removable defensive forts. This design drives attackers into a kill zone. They end up under fire from 3 sides. Der Reflex talks about how similar forts on Earth pushed the development of cannons, and how this advantage became obvious. He understands how the strategy will force enemy forces into a dense, vulnerable attack. Their plan is suddenly interrupted by a man bursting in with harsh news. The messenger reports in panic that a representative from Count Ferdinando has arrived. Another man adds, the aliens bring not only the Count's crown. They also raise into the sky the unicorn and the shield of Viscount Cayenne, an ascending nobleman. In his office, Van processes the news. The former village ruler has sent people. A heavy silence descends as he contemplates whether the Count intends to take everything back. The dull clink of the carriage wheel on the dirt road announces that a visitor is approaching. 2 women stand before the village. One decides to check if the rumors about the miracle worker are true. As their carriage clatters over the cobblestones, a voice announces, they will arrive very soon. In the echoing, shaking transport, 2 travelers continue their way to the village. With a gloved hand, a hand gently touches the young girl's hair, offering quiet reassurance. The young girl silently gives a barely noticeable, uncertain nod in response. The woman's palm-sized gaze is fixed on the target to get a closer look at their master. Inside, the Van's retainers set about preparing the reception room for their important guests. Van braces himself before the meeting, accepting that whatever happens it will happen. The doors open and two girls appear, an unexpected sight for the guards everyone was waiting for. Confident Viscount Panamera Cayenne introduces himself to the young Lord Van. Shy very young girl introduces herself. She is Art, the youngest daughter of Count Ferdinando. Van Sharp assesses the situation and concludes, the art of Panamera is a strong protector. Despite inner fear, Van politely meets his guest in the nameless village. Sitting, Van looks around at the impressive rapid rise of Panamera through the highest ranks. He concludes that her beauty must correspond to her unique strength and intelligence. Panamera directly asks Van if he knows the reason for their unexpected visit. Van immediately recognizes her straightforwardness as a tactic to stretch out his true motives. He gives his own sharp analysis of the complex political situation between their houses. He ends his theory with a modest confession that it is only a supposition. Panamera bursts out laughing, impressed by how 8-year-old children incredibly predicted everything in advance. She confirms that his guess was accurate, admitting, the Count is wary of the Marquis. Here his quiet disposition after years of wunderkind fame looks suspicious. She cannot comprehend why someone with such a name was sent to godforsaken lands. As the rumor goes, he was supposed to be trained to develop territories. His place on the border between council land and another kingdom is troubling. The true goal of the Count is to find out whether the Marquis has ambitions beyond his position. Van Kumlai stated that he was simply removed, dismissing any other remarks. Panamera watches him closely, trying to discern whether his simple statement is truthful. Deciding that his explanation is boring, she directly asked if he is telling the truth. She assumes that the rumor about the child prodigy is just a rumor, a simple fabrication. However, she sighs, recalling that in this village, as they said, there were only 100 people. She points out that he built a wall and rebuilt houses in just 2 months. His very experienced butler and skilled night maid are also working at full capacity. By rough estimate, her face becomes focused as she weighs his strengths. She asks if he transferred about 5,000 subordinates to accomplish all this. Her faction interprets any unnoticed actions as a potential and serious threat. She concludes that the sign must expect a lot from him. The idea that he is building a military outpost almost makes Vance choke with laughter. He explains their view is logical, but he was very quickly expelled. The silhouette of an angry knight looms, and the tense atmosphere sharply turns back. Van bursts into wild laughter. He cannot contain his joy. He explains the more serious the situation becomes, the funnier he finds it. Apologizing, he announces that he intends to dispel the obvious misunderstanding. He reveals his father allowed him to set out at the head with only minimal baggage, one companion. Art shudders, recalling how her own father quietly drove her out of the city. Panamera asks how he will explain his numerous retinue if they have abandoned him. Transition panel. D steps forward, explaining that they saw huge potential in Vans and followed it voluntarily. He laughs, admitting that he ignored his commander's letter and expects to be dismissed. Probably Aspart explains his own reasons very simply, saying that he is an old man. He saw Van's departure as a chance to retire and made training his hobby. They made an advertisement where Van treats lower-class people as equals with impeccable kindness. Van confirms their stories, expressing deep gratitude for their unwavering dedication. Panamera asks how to explain the incredible and rapid transformation of the village. With a smile that understands everything, Van suggests the demonstration would be much more effective. He gestures for them to follow him outside, leaving them hanging. Transition panel showing movement. Transition panel showing movement. Transitional panel with movement. Outside the disciplined squad of men, their feet stomp dully in unison, sharply and stunningly, as if stopped by noise. Panamera orders her troops to watch everything from the side, keeping at a safe distance. A crowd of peasants pours out in a line, curious about all this commotion. Van orders his men to bring the necessary wooden blocks for demonstration. Transition panel. The group marches on. A strange procession makes its way through a wide, open space. They stop in the middle of a deserted, empty field. Panamera looks with a wary expression, trying to understand how far they have gone. Van looked back, feeling that she might suspect an ambush. He consults with Esparta and determines the ideal place to start construction. He plans to place walls 2 meters apart to allow space for future changes. He turns to the stunned guests and declares that he will build the wall right now. The ground explodes. A giant wall of earth bursts from the landscape, tearing it into pieces. Van explains the wall is unstable and will collapse as soon as his mana runs out. He reveals that it is made from a composite of all available materials found in the earth. Panamura is still shaking after the demands from the display. They want to know what he has done. She asked if he used those same materials to build rural houses. He announces his next feat right on the spot. He imagines and assembles sturdy gates. Young Lord Van smiles gently and shows the gates he has just created. Young noblewoman Art approaches him and, asking about the nature of his magical talent, stops right in front of him. Her fierce guard Panamura demands an answer, what she just saw and exactly how he did it. A keen gaze, and she studies him from within, questioning his very essence and pondering who he is. Van calmly reveals his secret. He says that he has production magic and he can only create things. A tremor passes through Artis's body. She recalls. This is known as the unluckiest magic. His words echo in her memory, while her heart wildly pounds from the incredible revelation. A new chapter begins titled Art, a sad doll in a dark room. Her story begins with a memory of her father, who was always too busy to see her. Holding her doll in her hands, she remembers feeling completely worthless to her own family. She remembered being timid, doing poorly in school, and feeling incapable of anything. A ray of hope flashes in her young, determined eyes. Her only unique talent is the strange gift of marionette magic. Despite her own clumsiness, she could control dolls as if they were her own body. She playfully makes the little doll dance with a single flick of her fingers. A joyful blush spreads across her face as soon as she finds her true calling. Imagining how her parents would finally be proud of her, she feverishly practiced her magic. Besides her own things, the rabbit, she feels nervous and at the same time filled with hopeful excitement. She decides to put on a life-size doll dance for them. But her hopeful dream is suddenly shattered by a sudden, cruel roar. Her mother's face twists with rage as she screams that Artie is a bad child. He already remembered how he could not comprehend the sharp and furious outburst of his mother. In tears, she realizes, her one and only hope, her magic is also already deemed useless. After that day, her mother no longer even looked her way, and no one spoke to her. Filled with guilt, she believed that she had let the family down and destroyed their high hopes. Her face is a mask of torment as she sobs, feeling completely and utterly alone. Many years passed, and when she turned 10, her father called her for the first time in a long time. He coldly dismisses her worries about the summons and orders her to obey. She glanced sideways at the mysterious woman nearby and wondered who she was. The woman's rings jingle as she says their presence will determine the outcome. Art shuddered and, almost trembling with fear, began quietly introducing herself to the invisible guest. The woman introduces herself as V, says she is Countess Panamura, and asks about Art's marriage. Panamura explains, if the bride is suitable, the arrangement will proceed. She reassures the worried Art that they will refuse him if he is not suitable. Panamura clarifies that Art's older brothers are already engaged, so she remains the last option. Panamura, with a gentle smile, playfully tousles Art's hair, hoping he is a good person. In this barely perceptible touch, Art seems to be truly seen for the first time. The next 3 weeks in the carriage with Panamura became the happiest she had ever experienced. She recalls Panamura, although often angry over trifles, was generally truly kind. When Art called herself useless, Panamura scolded her and then hugged her tightly. The Viscount gently stroked her head every time they talked, constant support. Just the memory of those moments brings a tear of happiness to her eye. Even when she cried with joy, Panamura never got angry, he just calmly stroked her head. They stand side by side, the bond of trust between them grows stronger. Art came to love the hands of Lady Panamura. She gently clasped them in her palms. Her hands were gentle, warm, and truly magical to them. Panamura laughed, saying her hands only had scars and mana. When they approached the village, Artie decided she did not want to marry him. She decided to keep her distance and watched him as if she were a stranger. The profile angle shows Vans with a serious, focused, and determined expression. She admits to herself that Lord Vogan is clearly a special person. He is the complete opposite of her. His followers adore him, and he speaks confidently without any difficulties. Younger than her, he is full of talent and self-confidence, what she lacks. She secretly mourns her own fate. Her father quietly drove her out of the city. She wonders how he can be so different from her and asks why their paths diverged. Her face had a deep, thoughtful, and slightly anxious expression of thoughts. His words about the miracle he performed turned her jealousy into captivating curiosity. Remembering how important elementary magic is, she wonders if she could be like him. The desire to try again, but a little more persistently, ignites her heart. Panamura watches the incredible work of Vans and states, his magic is strong. Van says that his father expelled him, and he had no idea what his powers were capable of and what their true strength was. Panamura, the size at the level of foolishness, when he realized that the domain could grow exponentially. Van suggests that it is time to roll back and continue building the wall tomorrow. Penamura looks over her work and asks if he himself built these houses on the drawbridge. She doubts the strength and nature of the materials from which he built. Although not completely satisfied, Penamura admits that now she understands the situation. Van, with a joyful smile, confirms that the misunderstanding has already been resolved. Penamura said that she was also entrusted to discuss Art's marriage. Van confirms that he does not want any fights with others, so marriage is unnecessary. This only increases Penamura's curiosity. However, for sure, the village is destined to grow. With a malicious smile, she shifts her gaze directly to Lord Van himself. She admits that as soon as she first heard about the marriage plans, she firmly opposed them. She knew Art would be unhappy in a potentially hostile, distant, and secluded area. Van listens attentively, acknowledging the validity of her protective concerns. A pale Vadu artifact is shown, and she imagines the future cold treatment or violent death. Penamura admits she came by any means to find a reason to break the marriage between them. Van agrees her logic makes sense if you see them as two drops of water. She decided that Arda is simply mourning the lost future, and does so with tragic heroism. But now she solemnly and sincerely declares full and warm support for their engagement. She praises Van's mature foresight, his logic, and the unwavering loyalty of his subordinates. With a warm smile, she says, if he were her age, she would not mind marrying him at all. Van is completely embarrassed, and at the same time infinitely touched by her generous praise. The comedic chart shows how his impression of her rapidly soars pure admiration. Penamura returns to Art and says that the decision depends on how both of them feel. Holding the artifact close, she says her role is done. Now the two must decide together. Van admits that she is a good person, but Art sobbed then himself does not know what to do. Van panics, suggests settling in the village without any marriage as an obligation. Art releases a quiet sigh of incredible relief, feeling that his generous offer has indeed proven timely. Penamura notes that the marriage will greatly benefit Van politically. She prophesies his rare strength will take him beyond even his own father, and an alliance with Art would guarantee support from the Count in Penamura itself. She laughs, admitting the offer is so advantageous it sounds like a scam. Van's mind digs into human thoughts question after question. He tries to figure out what benefit this gives to Count Fernando. Penamura smiles indulgently, enjoying how everything in their negotiations has gone awry. She announces that they will stay overnight, giving him a whole day to think everything over. Van is stunned by their sudden decision to stay overnight in his village. Penamura laughs, finally behaving like a boy of his age. Embarrassed, Van asks if her soldiers are staying as well. She says it is frightening for a delicate lady in enemy lands, and wants her allies nearby. Penamura asks what Lady Art thinks about staying at Lord Van's estate. The young girl is fiercely embarrassed, blushes, and trembles, as she insists that she could never under any circumstances share a bed. Seeing her panic, Van notes to himself, she is only 10 and she is unprepared. Penamura pulls the embarrassed Art into warm embraces, admitting she is still a child. With a cheerful smile, Van immediately offers to build a separate cottage for them. The soldiers, who are waiting to sleep in groups, are joyfully excited by this news. Having invited the guests to dinner, Van sends them to the new lodge to rest. In the kitchen, the Vanes waited, as if they needed to prepare meat from a raised wolf. Van enthusiastically talks about the rare and valuable fangs and claws of the creature. Till passionately declares that she will prepare the best dish, so that his marriage will succeed. Van took it back and asked why she supports the union. Till admits that she will probably be lonely, but believes that she can already be good support for him. She explains that a good wife sets healthy boundaries, and this makes everything easier. Another retainer, Kamsi, agrees that Art is a good choice, but would prefer someone stronger. The executor's servant Esparta arrived and stated that the marriage brings no benefit to Art's father. Van correctly guesses Art, probably without basic magic, was expelled just like him. As Sparta believes, the Viscount Penamura's admiration for Van's power is likely sincere. However, he warns that the marriage will cause significant changes in circumstances. The alliance will grant the Count and the Viscount access to the fortress's blueprints and weapons. Van adds his connection to the Callow program to the list of possible interests. Espart took note that Benz's father will most likely disrupt the engagement for his own plans. The advice explains, his father may resort to underhanded methods to drive the Count into poverty. Vankali notes how terrifying the prospect of such political maneuvers looks. Around him are loyal servants, and Van declares, his main priority is readiness for Art. His eyes flash with determination as he chooses how to act next. A new chapter, anticipation for tomorrow, begins in the grand dining hall. At the table, the clinking of silverware is heard as Van addresses Lady Art. With a gentle smile, he suggests they make sweets together sometime soon. Arda was confused because he spoke to her and could only manage a shy, affirmative yes. She struggles to find the right words and politely thanks for the delicious dish before her. Against the backdrop, Till clenches her fist in triumph, she is overwhelmed with joy from the praise. She is already reflecting on her shyness. She admits she stammers because almost no one talks to her. She nervously glances at the young lord, secretly gathering courage within herself. A wave of relief washes over her when she sees that he does not look at her with contempt. She recalls how the experienced Lady Panamura immediately approved of him. Van gently continues the conversation and asks what exactly she likes. He shines and admits that he also likes cute things such as small animals. Articularifies his affection for inanimate things, dolls, and beautiful flowers. Interested in her attention to dolls, Van admits he has not seen that many. He politely asks if she would show him her dolls, and she shyly agrees. Art finds his mature, patient calm amazingly comforting. Remembering her dolls or in the carriage, she plans to show them to him tomorrow. Van's sincere smile and thank you for her praise touched us to the depths of the soul. While she continues to eat, a new strange feeling begins to stir inside her. Her heart wildly pounds from the strange feeling of anticipation that she cannot explain. She clutches the front of her dress, overwhelmed by the new feeling. Panamura watches the young girl's reaction with a smile of a signifier and a mischievous grin. The continued smile of the elderly woman makes the embarrassed artist look away. Art recalls how Lord Von again and further talked with her about many different things. She feels that she is getting used to him and catches herself wanting to talk even more. She can no longer hold back the desire to question him and meet his gaze. She clenches her fist and decides to find the courage to speak to him herself. The three sit at a long dining table in silence and a solemn, restrained atmosphere. Panamura sits very close to Art to support during the meal. Panamura's comment about a piece from the village squeezes the Art, and it is no longer able to speak. Then Panamura praises the tasty food and quality ingredients for Ban. She also notes how the peasants greet their lord with respect and admiration. Humbly declines the praise and gives credit to the Till's kitchen for supporting morale. Panamura calls him modest and jokes that she would boast about such achievements all over the city. He again gives credit to his subordinates for the collected materials, belittling his own role. Art looks at them from afar, and her hands convulsively clutch her chest. Panamura says goodbye to them for the evening and promises to meet again tomorrow. A panel with a speckled transition changes the scene. Van notices these delays in movements and hesitation, as if she is pondering whether she has something to say. He approaches her and asks what happened, and she freezes in place. After 5 long minutes of silence, Art finally begins to speak. Her hands tremble and fumble as she gathers every crumb of her own courage. She bursts out and immediately mumbles thanks for the day, confessing that the conversation about the engagement makes her nervous. In a frantic rush of fuss, she admits that his kindness is a great comfort to her. Before he can respond, she wishes him good night and abruptly disappears. Van froze suddenly and thought that her response was not bad at all. Art dashed into the corridor and ran wildly, beating herself up with reproaches for having spoken too quickly and fled. In panic, she freezes and suddenly realizes she doesn't know where her room is. A small cartoon version of herself points in the right direction. She finally reaches her room and there is already Panamura, and he is already without clothes. Panamura playfully throws her onto the bed and, teasing, asks about how she spent time with Van. Mortified, Art throws his hands up and shouts that there was no line that needed to be crossed. Panamura suggests staying a few more days instead of leaving tomorrow. Art quietly agrees and a blush still barely dusts her cheeks. She decides to offer money to finance their extended stay in the village. Clenching her teeth with determination, she vows, tomorrow she will start a conversation with Van. That night, Art can't wait for tomorrow. He feels hope that she will still hear him. The next morning, it is announced that Esparta will lead the construction of the fortifications. The man addresses the gathered villagers, warning, be careful with the big work. This team was entrusted with gathering supplies using strong performers. The observer shifts his gaze to another group in the crowd. Or those team members playfully ask Van why he lined up together with the workers. Van explains that they are hunting Magic Beast again because the villagers like the swords he made. He lays out the plan, sell quality materials and keep the rest. Van addresses the crowd, wishing them a safe day working on the wall. Then he announces a big barbecue on Friday and Saturday, and this shocks the villagers. The crowd erupts in a wild cheer. Clenched fists twitch upward, filled with excitement and delight. Once quiet residents turn into a joyful farewell crowd. Panamura greets Van and notes that his speech was interesting and effective. He replies that since they are not a formal military unit, they can be simpler and not too strict. Panamura laughs and says that the promise of extra alcohol for the best performers helps. Art approaches Van at Panamura, her steps uncertain. She flinches as soon as her gaze rests on Van's, but does not retreat. Van catches the gaze with a pleasant surprise on his face. He utters a gentle good morning, and she replies stammering. Young Lord Van, with a warm smile, notes that Lady Art is now full of energy. Art confirms her renewed strength, clenching her palms and gathering courage. With dazzling eyes, she confesses as if to herself she wants to be closer. The scene sharply shifts to heavy footsteps. A dull thud rolls through the dense forest. Two figures, Ortho and his companion, breathe heavily and flee, escaping an invisible pursuer. In a flashback, skillful subordinates of Panamura are shown diligently building a village. Their work progressed so quickly that it almost caught up with, or even surpassed, the fundamental wall of Sparta. Van recalls how he then created powerful ballistae atop the walls. After dinner, his comrades dragged that exhaust away along the taken line so that he could continue training. A brilliant transition shows that time has passed since those events. In just 2 weeks, a huge wall with 2 forts was completed. Van finds that building a town piece by piece is a pleasant activity. A comical sound effect emphasizes how he gave Panamura a powerful push. A joke like Panamura, her own fortifications stand prouder than usual. Avoiding eye contact, Van sternly tells himself that he is not stupid enough to touch. Tall fortified walls rise above the endless forested landscape below. Trembling with embarrassment, the little cart struggles with its own thoughts. Panamura announces, their next task is to build houses and attract more residents. The man with silver hair wistfully says, his personal dream is to have his own land. Panamuragrans plans a future victory so grand that it may require land as payment. Suddenly, a huge explosion thundered from the distant forest. It shook the bastion. A frightened Ortho appears, shouting that their pursuer managed to slip away. A surprised wagon asks confusedly what exactly escaped from them. With terrible force, a massive armored dragon tears through the line of trees and crushes everything around. Orda and his companions, Stare and Hare, ask why the dragon appeared here. Panamura realizes they are being used as bait to win Van time and escape. Van cannot hold back from the wall. Can they even defeat such a huge creature? His face hardens from the cruel realization. People can be truly seriously wounded. A group of determined men steps forward, declaring they are ready to fight. Panamura, with grim agreement, sets about helping. He knows the dragon will reach them anyway. Van grits his teeth ground, and pure, unwavering determination froze on his face. He takes command and orders the Orthos squad to retreat behind the wall rampart. He directs all available hands to the wall and orders them to close the gate. The height of the newly erected fortification wall rampart is impressive. Panamura identifies the creature as a force dragon and gives his own orders. The horrified artist calls out Lord Van's name in a trembling, barely audible voice. Van turns to the frightened girl, and his expression softens with anxiety. He admits to himself, of course, he is scared. Apologizing for frightening her, he tries to relieve her fear. He reminds her that on their side are stronger ballistae and an elemental mage. A vertical panel sharply cuts the frame dark and white, black and white without any halftones. He notes that the formidable Panamura is also here to help them. Confidently smiling, he promises that they will not lose the battle. Having already set off, he wishes him luck and desperately begs him not to die. Vanen orders his servant to accompany the still wary Lady Art to the estate, or those parties desperately rush headlong to the huge fortified gates. Dragonflies glide low behind them as they shout for the gates to remain open. Van orders the ballista crews to aim past those who are fleeing. One of Ortho's comrades stumbles and falls, and the rest are frozen in shock. The woman tells the others to go on without her, not to worry about her fate. Ortho turns to the dragon to taunt it and shouts for it to pay attention to him. His attempt fails. The dragon does not stop and continues advancing, completely ignoring him. The dragon swiftly dives down, keeping its gaze on Ortho, and he realizes he is the target. He is sure he is doomed, but still shouts for the others to leave him and go. In a moment, Cusula rushes past Ortho, becoming the new bait to save his boss. The speed of the party leader, the coward Cusala, will allow him to return alive. Cusala comically worries aloud, saying he has nothing left except a lizard's tail. Van notes despite their jokes, their determination is deadly serious. From the command post, Van orders the ballistic team to line up for a volley. He grimly jokes that Cusala looks tasty and they must shoot quickly. Cusala runs with all his might, while a huge dragon roars menacingly behind him. From his place on the wall, Panamura declares that she can stop the dragon from moving. The blonde warrior, with a resolute cry, announces that she will attack first. Van watches to whom she predicted this, knowing that she is a veteran of title battles. A close-up of the Magial orb confirms his conclusion. She is of the highest grade. The crushing dark energy confirms his assessment. She is a powerful elemental mage. A giant spear of fire and shadow bursts from her position and flies toward the beast. A swirling vortex of magical energy cuts the battlefield with dazzling flashes. The fiery javelin continues its devastating path toward the distant dragon. The dragon sees a colossal magical attack flying straight at it. With powerful wing strokes, the dragon precisely dodges the main attack. In close-up, the destructive power of the wasted magical projectile is visible. Dodging, the dragon receives a hail of arrows from the Avalia ballista. Van calculated that about half of their shots should hit the target. He hopes that piercing its body, wings, and legs will be able to slow this creature down. Noticing that the bolts are working, he immediately gives the order for the second volley. From the walls, another heavy rain of large bolts descends. This time the bolts thud against the dragon, but with almost no effectively making it even angrier. Van grimly notes the failure of the second ballista, and concludes that the first caused significant damage. The soldier exhales with relief, thinking that somehow he survived the encounter. Van quickly dispels his own hopes and says that the dragon has not yet been discarded. Panemura casts another powerful spell to buy time for evacuation. Her attack strikes directly at the beast, and a huge explosion erupts. Fire magic envelops the dragon while Panemura carefully watches the strike. The resulting explosion stuns, a complete cataclysm of fire and power. The dragon roars madly in agony, completely engulfed in furious hellfire. Panemura contemplates the frightening versatility and power of her magic. She announces a return to the village to prepare a worthy counterattack. Van gives the order, shouting for everyone to run to the village for safety. He examines the wounded wings of the dragons. Now it can only pursue them on foot. Van realizes this magical creature is incredible, unique, beyond any boundaries. A brave soldier volunteers to cover the rear while the group continues to retreat. Van protests and shouts that a physical fight will be futile against the monster. The gray-haired man Esparta passes by them with silent, swift determination. Van calls out his name and, stunned, sees Esparta heading straight for the dragon. Esparta calmly steps towards the threatening beast and orders the others, "Run away." He stubbornly continues forward, ignoring Van's relentless pleas to flee. Van watches freezes in fear as Esparta walks towards certain death. His fear turns into defiance as he refuses to run without Esparta. Esparta turns away and smiles wryly, acknowledging this complicates his plan. Esparta prepares for a noble sacrifice, but Van grabs him and prevents him from escaping. He will not go alone. The massive dragon flies low over the rampart and unleashes a powerful energy blast. The dragon's strike hits the stone wall in explosive, catastrophic shock. The ground rumbles and crumbles as the explosion tears the fortified wall to pieces. Having emerged from the dust, Esparta notes with surprise that Van did not lose his composure during the attack. Esparta slowly retreats, gloomily thinking that their time is up. Van claps his hands and urges us to scatter, promising red wine as a reward. Esparta talks about the difficulties of running for an elderly man, but agrees to try. Van orders comes in to accompany Sparta, while he himself commands the defense, then suddenly takes off. He dashed along the huge stone wall, rushing to the village and his troops. Breathless, Van feels that the village is far, unbelievably far, as he continues running. The mental limit reveals how Ortho's party is wheezing, exhausted, powerless on the very edge. From the walls above, Panemura calls Van, announcing that her troops are already in position. Van Yell turned back and said that the villagers are also ready, ordered them to aim and prepare. Panemura lowers her gaze and asks when she should act, requesting instructions. Encouragement from Van shots. He tells her not to panic and not to rush while aiming. Panemura's gaze is filled with deep concentration as she waits for orders. Van freezes for a moment, realizing this mighty warrior is asking him for orders. He quickly makes a plan and orders her to stop the dragon if it reaches them. Then he explains that they will release a synchronized volley from the ballistae. Panemura's uncertainty disappears instead. A broad, confident smile appears and she praises the plan. She apologizes for her delay, flushed by the new challenge, and promises dragon meat. The dragon begins to break free from the stone dungeon, and life awakens in it again. Van shots in alarm shout that the dragon is coming, and his face pales from urgency. With a deafening roar, the beast burst into freedom and rushed forward at incredible speed. Van hides behind cover and realizes he needs to buy time for his friend's escape. The deputy commander suddenly breaks forward and shouts for everyone to leave it to him. His two comrades can only marvel at his speed. They are confident they can succeed. He throws himself directly into the path of the monstrous dragon rushing towards him. With a fierce battle cry, D prepares to face the beast power's attack face to face. The giant claw of the dragon cuts through the air and flies down with deadly force at the lone warrior. Dion and his two comrades bravely confront the dragons, interrupting their attack and stopping the momentum. The strike sends a powerful shockwave through the armored soldiers. A massive stone wall suddenly bursts from its place, hits the dragon and pushes it back. Overcome with anxiety, the fanatic watches as the wave of battles shifts again. Aspart watches the scene with a grim, determined face. Asparta rushes forward, sensing the impending danger and preparing to act. The magical stone wall crumbles under the colossal force of the dragon. The dragon breaks the barrier with explosive, relentless power. Ban urgently calls the Spartan Commission to hurry while they continue to retreat. Two junior soldiers with grim faces acknowledge the order and rush to safety. Van Marbles tries to understand how they manage to be so strong and resilient, and marvels at their own toughness. Aspartha explains that D, having vast experience, is the fastest among them. A close-up shows the dragon's threatening maw with sharp teeth. Two junior soldiers look around in fear as the dragon swiftly attacks them. She sees the trap and hears the name Van Shot's Panamura calling her to attack. Panamura's eyes narrow with concentration as she growls, confirming her recognition. She unleashes her mighty magic and chanting its name shouts, "Fire Javelin." A massive spear-like flame erupts. It bursts forth and covers the dragon with a whirlwind of fire. Van freezes for a moment, stunned by the colossal destructive power of the spell. He quickly recovers and orders to set the ballast die on the western side of the fire. The dragon thrashes wildly in pain, trapped inside the fiery vortex. An extraordinary rain of giant iron bolts covers the beast, striking its hide with a rumble. Thanks to its agility, the dragon dodges most of the projectiles. Yet a few bolts hit, breaking through the way and biting deeper into its flesh. Those that hit inflicted deadly wounds on the beast. It was battered and bleeding. Venz shouts for the last ballista to fire everything they have at the beast. Panamura watches the barrage, her face showing focused, tense determination. The dragon finally chokes on its strength and falls. Its huge body heavily settles on the ground. Van examines the wounds, noting, the injuries are fatal, though he tried to protect the head. Panamura carefully orders the teams to prepare for another salvo and stand ready. She tests Dai, giving him a dangerous task to confirm the dragon's death. Carefully tiptoeing, rubble-strewn sneaks across the battlefield, heading toward the fallen beast. The ballistic crew watches, holding their breath, swallowing their nerves. D stands before the enormous head of the dragon. It lies motionless among the ruins. Carefully extends the sword and gently nudges the creature with the nose. The eye of the seemingly dead dragon suddenly opens wide. Its jaw lunges forward to attack. The blur of motion fills the frame as D reacts with incredible speed. With a heavy screech of tension, he swings, and with one mighty upward slash brings down his colossal greatsword. Panamura calmly, attentively watches as the final, decisive blow lands. The giant body of the dragon crashes down and thuds against the ground. Now it is truly dead. Relief washes over Ven like a wave as he quietly murmurs that now they are safe. He sharply turns, his cloak spinning wildly, and prepares to address the victorious troops. He raises his hand high and calls them to roar in triumphant celebration. The soldiers erupt in an inspired, mighty, joyful shout, celebrating the victory won at the cost of incredible effort. The rumble of their cheers echoes in the air, filling the village with relief. Raised fists on joyful faces are evidence of their survival. The celebration continues, a sea of happy faces against the backdrop of a majestic stone building. Nearby, a crowd of peasants and soldiers buzzes, babbling, excitedly calling to each other, and the relief is palpable. Their faces shine with joy and wonder at the incredible victory. Two young girls Till and Art rush headlong to Vogan and ask if he is okay. Van calms them and sends Till to check on the exhausted soldiers. Later, Van sits on a crate, exhales with relief, finally able to rest. Panamura approaches with confident footsteps, playfully tousling his hair. She congratulates him on the command and on their success in defeating the dragon. They discuss the weight of their victory, acknowledging how close they came to disaster. Panamura described in detail the destruction the dragon could have caused and called it luck. Van asked if the city accounts would really be so vulnerable. Panamura pays tribute to her powerful allies Esparta in the formidable D. Van Beams proudly boasts about his allies and their future potential. Panamura playfully tugs at her forehead, reminding him of his mighty ballista. Van's ambitions grow. He imagines an even more powerful weapon, a frightening thought for Panamura. She changes the subject, announcing that they need to hold a dragon capture ceremony. She explains the tradition of naming the best among the contributors dragon slayer. Van is embarrassed by the very thought of giving up such a magnificent title. The ceremony begins with the preparation of the official announcement. From the balcony, a man loudly announces to the crowd that the forest dragon has been killed. He declares his intention to recognize the key figure who helped them. The crowd below, including D and Esparta, listens in tense anticipation. The announcer awards the honor to Viscount Panamura Cayenne, who accepts the ovation. A sharp flash of light signifies a tense atmosphere. A crowd of peasants stands motionless, gathered in a strict formation. Faces are serious and unwavering. Panamura weighs the dignity of Van's knowing. Dragon threats usually require knights and court wizards. She grips the balcony railings and declares that they survived with minimal losses and an incredible achievement. In the noisy crowd, she prepares to name the greatest creators of their victory. First, she honors Deputy Commander D for beheading the dragon and ending the battle. After that, she introduces the incredibly rare and extremely powerful master of elemental magic Esparta. She explains his incredible magical skill made his contribution the second greatest. The peasants freeze with delight, whispering about the spark and incredible magical power. Finally, she glances at the little boy nearby and prepares for her last announcement. From the balcony, her voice thundered, naming the fourth son of the Sign Lord Vanferio. The crowd below erupts with a thunderous cheer of support, their hands raised in unified celebration. She praises his intelligence, magic, and leadership, claiming that his contribution is the third largest. Overwhelmed with emotions but satisfied, Van waves to the crowd that adores him with a bright, joyful smile. Applause and adoration make the young lord blush with uncontrollable joy. When the ceremony ends, he comically accepts his new status as the beloved idol of the entire village. In Panamura Marvels, a grand material gathering festival begins with her new sword sharpness. Van explains that he created a unique blade specifically for collecting monster parts. Panamura is shocked when she learns he made over 100 swords for each soldier. With a radiant, envious smile, he offers to make her one for 5 gold coins. His witty business proposal entertains and impresses the mighty fighter. Thanks to the soldiers, Panamura gathers materials for the dragon at an astonishing speed. Returning, the young man freezes in shock upon seeing the incredible new village fortifications. Rango's companion warns, the wall is only the beginning of all the surprises. The young man is left speechless and cannot comprehend what could be even more stunning. Van meets the returning merchants. They respectfully bow to their young lord. Rango describes the impressive caravan assembled at the request of the commerce president. His large retinue keeps merchants, adventure scouts, and slaves as auxiliary personnel close by. Van is impressed by the size of the team and agrees to show them the new storerooms. He goes ahead while the large caravan column rumbles and enters the newly fortified settlement. A sharp, piercing scream full of pure shock echoes from behind in the caravan. One of the merchants shouts aloud in shock as he just notices the huge body of the dragon. Rango and Van shift their gaze to the source of the commotion in the vast warehouse. The newly arrived merchants whisper, unable to believe their own eyes and unable to comprehend what they see. Rango's shot instantly turns into a greedy smile. He assesses what profit it could bring. His sinister seller's smile appears as he calculates the selling price, 150 platforms. The unfathomable figure of 10 billion yen explodes in Van's head like winning the lottery. Van, still trembling from the number he saw, asked to explain how the auction works. Ringo explains, it is a grand auction in the capital for goods on the level of national treasures. Van listens attentively while Rango confirms the colossal profit they can expect. Rango praises Van's caring nature, unlike other nobles who shamelessly skim the profits. He clenches his fist and declares that their previous profit was already worth risking their lives. Van quietly surveys the scale of the business opportunity, now unfolding right before him. Meeting gaze face to face, Rango throws a bold proposal to create their own company. Van wonders aloud if founding the company will be a difficult task. His companions are impressed. In such a remote place there is a lively village. Suddenly, a group of competing merchants from Merry Chamber of Commerce arrives. They patronizingly treat Van and hint that they will help him open a branch store for his development. The leader puffs out his chest, promising to buy materials at the highest price. Van immediately gets to the point and asks how much they sell materials for the dragon. They lower the price and promise special treatment in the future to sweeten the deal. They immediately see their plan and understand that it is a short-sighted and purely profit-driven tactic. He understands they do not care about the future development of this village or its potential. Their only goal is colossal profit from that one unprecedented deal. With a bright, disarming smile, he politely sends them away and says he will think about it. As he walks away, the merchants shout after him, thinking he is naive. They think he might not understand. Dragon can sell cheaper than they offered. Rango's companion flinches when Rango looks at him, and he understands. 80 platinums is too little. The companion insists, top-level materials are definitely worth more than 100. The cheerful merchants explode with anger, shouting that no one would buy at such a price. Rango intervenes and teaches his own. Reasoned assessments and caution are needed. He explains the auction safeguards minimum contract prices and repeated listings of items. The true mettle of a merchant, as he claims, is shown in how he reduces risks, especially robbery. The merry merchant leader grabs Rango and tries to forcibly make him cooperate. Van watches their sneaky negotiations and realizes he hears every word. Rango's brother does not take his eyes off him, and a quiet, unbreakable determination is frozen on his face. Rango himself gives a firm, silent nod, refusing to succumb to threats and intimidation. He states that he and his brother would never do such a nasty thing for 1 platinum. The rival merchant slaps the table with his fist, threatening expulsion from the chamber. Van admits that their public quarrel has stained the entire business image. He approaches them and says they should not push away a potentially valuable client one like him. The brothers pour out their anger on the greed and insurmountable stupidity of their rivals. Rango declares that he no longer feels any loyalty and will become an independent trader. He explains 3 conditions for founding the company, including Noble's recommendation. Van understands the first 2 conditions are met, but the recommendation is an obstacle. He talks about the system of noble patronage and the necessary financial reward. This system allows nobles to make colossal profits, practically doing nothing. He asks the brothers what typical reward is paid to nobles for their support. One of the brothers looks surprised at how much Van knows about the noble human mind. Van admits the difference in payment depending on rank is a high barrier. He asks a chilling question, which Noble advised their powerful rival. With a stern expression, he reveals that it is none other than the royal family of Belrenet. 2 brothers exhale together, heavily in silent agreement with defeat before the terrible news. While the competing firm is well established, the company will inevitably become stronger and larger thanks to the support of the royal authority. Good customer service will strengthen their image and help gain even more noble support. Van Muses says that when royalties are preferred, it is essentially fraud against the system. His companions add, Mary Corporation has the best real estate everywhere. A shocking rumor emerges. The founder was the lover of an ancestral king. Van Grimace realizes that the situation is steadily worsening. He believes that other companies are vulnerable to exposure by competitors. He finds hope thanks to the broad international connections of the trade guild. Rango confirms that their international status and funds are not a problem. Van brings them back to the central issue, a recommendation from a noble. He explains the father severed all ties and the brother has no noble title. A sigh of doom escapes him as he realizes they have no choice. Suddenly Rango's face lights up. He remembers his only noble ally Count Panamura. Van playfully mocks the brothers for their sudden, wildly excited fuss. Rango grabs his brother and decides to find out how many they bought, while Van meanwhile gets scared and worries about her. Panamura looks calm and confident, and simply says that helping her does not bother her. She laughs confidently but with a confused expression when answering the woman's question. Panamura, training her soldiers, advises him to consider her special situation. Van understands. Even kings have their problems, and realizing this, she understands that she has nothing to lose. She feels that it is precisely her commoner origin that makes her think she subtly annoys them. Panamura explains that her lack of land forces her to resort to showy actions to gain the support of the common people. This is a profitable deal for her, a perfect opportunity for a loud exit. Van rejoices, realizing that this plan will prevent his family from finding out about his actions. Panamura warns, conquering the main dragon will attract the attention of the high nobles. She considers his experiences too exaggerated for a child, although she acknowledges her own anxieties. She, considering his youth, says that he is still just a boy after all. Smiling faintly, she offers to teach him a way to avoid getting involved. Van shocks her with a proposal. He asks if she has a plan. She confirms it is simple. Panamura reveals his grand decision. He must become noble and establish a new home. She casually rewrites the story, claiming that he defeated the dragon and she did almost nothing. In panic, Van accuses her of rewriting the story just to make him look better. He says you are cool, and he asks what the problem is while Van's inner self looks completely satisfied with her bust. Van says he is afraid his father and brothers might cause him trouble. Panamura confidently states, killing a dragon at 8 guarantees him nobility. The weight of her words hangs in the air for a moment, then moves into the next second. She presents the result as purely positive, profit and a new corporation. Pan American sees that she understands why he has such an uneasy feeling about this situation. Rango appears with a creepy smile and declares that he has burned all their opponents. Panamera drily advises him to use his ballista to kill the enemies. Van shows if they take all the glory for themselves, Rango will not be able to make a name for himself. Panamera's sharp gaze narrows as she addresses the young man before her. Rango asks if the great Panamera Carlocane is really worried about him. With a wolf growling nearby, she contemptuously mocks the very thought of worry. She laughs, playfully grabs the frightened Rango, and jokes as if she is going to eat him. Panamera generously offers this time to give him the honor so he can grow. With renewed strength, Rango asked Van if he could sell these materials for 130 platinum coins. Van smiles radiantly cheerfully, all right, and seals the victory with the glow of a happy smile. The negotiations are declared successful, the merchants look relieved and satisfied. Later, Van explains Panamera's condition and takes a share of his future business as a baron. Rival merchants mock their slow progress, confidently saying that without their help they will fail. Van lays out his cunning but reliable scheme to exploit their rivals' despair. He suggests turning to Ortho for escort, but Panamera rejects the idea. Panamera insists on going to the capital to help him appeal to the nobility. Van is delighted. He finally realizes he no longer needs to worry about lack of people or security. He expresses gratitude, confident that everything will be fine with her powerful help. Panamera blushes at his praise, a rare sight that shocks Van and his companion. Van excitedly announces that a festival will be held on their way to the capital. He asks if it is possible and Rango assures him he will prepare a large carriage. Preparation for their great journey begins with a feeling of excitement. They show a huge, specially constructed carriage wheel, a hint at the scale of the entire entourage. The bed of the giant carriage holds a huge bale covered with thick canvas. Van and his friend froze in amazement when they saw the colossal cart on platforms, made of light wood. Panamera explains that they will use her strong, fast military horses to pull it. The giant carriage thunders and rushes down the highway at incredible speed and power. The small caravan of the rival merchant slowly stretches through the deserted mountains. Among the smugglers, ahead the van's group makes a foolish mistake. They mock the very idea of selling dragon materials in such a distant, remote place. The chief merchant is certain they will come to him begging for a caravan. Their carriage shakes wildly because an invisible transport is catching up with them. The colossal carriage, pulled by a mighty horse, rumbles past their small cart. The merchants froze, not believing their eyes, and wondered if it was the carriage of some nobleman. They recognized the unicorn on the banner's coat of arms, and with growing despair, absolute horror takes hold. One of them noticed how Rango took the reins, and it confirmed their worst fears. Panamera rides alongside, and her long hair waves majestically in the wind. Her determined facial expression is seen in close-up as she looks ahead. The merchants recognized her as a rising star and panic broke out. Why is she there? Why did she come? Their plan to break Bell and Rango by taking control of logistics completely failed. With despair, they realize, for their efforts they will have to bear colossal losses. The inability to deliver 40 Armadale items violates their guild contract. They argue whether to apologize and ask for help, but their leader rejects the idea. The beard leader decides to lie and report that he was cheated. With a grim look, he orders their broken caravan column to turn around and head back. The beaten merchants begin their long, shameful journey back to the capital. Their failed gambit leaves a bitter taste in the air. 3 merchants look completely broken and frightened because of their predicament. The consequences of their greed and arrogance are about to unfold. The new chapter introduces King Scuderia Dino and Sorrible Rinnet. The narrative tells about his military reforms, which place the power of weapons at the center. These reforms are described as a long and exhausting process for the kingdom. The political landscape was cruelly redrawn by the king's new politicians. The old system, under which nobles were given positions of power, is explained. As a result, many capable sons from noble families lost their jobs. The political balance shifted. Houses like Count Ferdinado's lost power. The nobleman watches in despair as the influence of his house falls. And conversely, houses with military might like Marquis Ferdio's rapidly grew. Panamera walks through the luxurious hall, contemplating the new political reality. She recalls her own exhausting training after she was registered. Her relentless dedication led to her becoming a platoon commander. Her valor in the war against Yelenida earned her the rank of captain at 16 years old. 6 years later, she was suddenly promoted directly to Viscount by the king's order. A voice from the past noted that they thought she would come here. Count Ferdinando expected her to use her new awards to petition for a rank promotion. In the throne room, King Dino interrogates her about why she wants to grant the title to someone else. The king's expression is sharp, majestic power and cold distrust. Panemura explains that Lord protects a remote village and could not appear in court. The king's interest flared, but he cannot understand what could have deserved a military decoration. She stuns the entire court by revealing, Lord killed a dragon. Can a magician from manufacturing truly kill a dragon if asked the question? The king leans forward. His curiosity bursts into action, and he gathers himself and demands to know who he is. Panemura reveals her name Van Ferdo, an 8-year-old hero and dragon slayer. The king is shocked Marquis did not inform him of this. Panemura confirms that he is unaware. She tells how Van arrived at the village under attack and wiped out the bandits. The king is delighted, pointing out what the boy is capable of at such a young age. The court buzzes with confusion as she recounts how he fortified the village. She lists his small strength and humbly says that she was only an obstacle. Finally, she states that the decisive force was Lord Vaughn's strength. Count Ferdinando looks intently at Panemura, not believing what he sees and demands proof. Calmly adds that they also have materials from 40 armored lizards. This incredible claim ripples through the courtroom with a wave of shocked, excited whispers. A deafening sharp slap from the king echoes through the hall, instantly bringing silence. Panemura explains, the testimonies of the residents confirm that the boy took command of the battle. In a private conversation, the count hints to the king that the boy is being coached. The king rejects this, saying that he trusts Panemura to verify all doubts. Sighing, the count admits, the truth will be verified very soon. Panemura received a stern warning about the consequences of deception. She calls the king to see with his own eyes the incredible achievements of Van. Embarrassed, the king declares his desire to meet Veniford as soon as possible. In the capital, the head of a colossal petrified dragon is driven through the streets in columns. The crowd, bustling and chattering incessantly, gathers Tojtharal completely enchanted by the incredible spectacle. People recognize Lady Panemura as soon as she makes her way through the crowd. The whisper of the spectatorsis, the hero Marcafordio really a son. The crowd buzzes with disbelief. How could a child have fallen on the dragon? Panemura announces that Van's dragon-slaying medal will be awarded later. Overwhelmed with emotions, Rango declares that he will name his company after himself. When a memory of his brother haunts him, he wholeheartedly dedicates the company name to him. He quickly decides to officially register it as the company Bell Ringo. In the following days, the incredible news rapidly spread around the world. The story of the new company and the new baron became a legend. They became the hottest topic throughout the royal capital. Describe in detail the heroic sweep of the tail as if the guy had cornered the dragon. The story changed each time. Now they said he held a giant sword in his hands. The legend ended with him cutting off the dragon's head with a single blow. Panemura thinks that rumors grow on their own, and her role was exaggerated and blown out of proportion. Looking out the carriage window, she thinks the guy should be grateful. In 1.5 months after Panemura's departure, the village managed to change. Hard, tireless work transformed the landscape around the village. The villagers completed the construction of a formidable fortified wall with a large gravel foundation. Ordinary houses were rebuilt into stylish ones, so the village became even more beautiful. During this period, 2 magnificent new towers were also built. Sun rays shine on the impressive new structures under the clear bright sky. The diagram shows that Vance prefers high places and strategic views. The knight looks up in wonder. Alligatover turned out to be not just a wonder it can be climbed on. He orders the tired fighters to climb to the opposite tower for training. Van watches them go, impressed by their courage and inexhaustible energy. The long ascent to the tower turns out to be a hard journey. Frame by frame, the scene climbs the stairs confidently, quickly, and continuously. Van, gasping for breath, admits, when they reach the summit, he will no longer be able to move. Finally reaching the summit, the group exhales together with relief. Van, Til, and Compson stand together, serving their domain. For now, the notes are soaked in silence. This land is sized for only 100 inhabitants. Van proudly suggests naming his new settlement Vantown. Til teases him, sure that he is just joking about the name. Scenes from Sharp Eyes notice something moving in the distance on the landscape. He explains that his vision is getting better, unlike Van's. He notices a group of children and elderly people approaching the village. Til offers them lunch while they wait for the visitors to arrive. Van excitedly shares the news about the possibility of trying his favorite sandwiches. While they eat, a young girl is seen. She walks to her place. Arda runs to them and urgently calls Lord Vona. He couldn't get to capital, so Art lives in the village. Van warmly greets the girl who is breathing heavily, asks what happened, and calls her Lady Art. He mentally hesitates. He almost forgot her title because she is a child. He feels a paternal urge to stroke her head and does it very gently. A simple, humane gesture makes the Art shudder and choke with shame, blushing madly. Van looked enchanted at her reaction and mentally called her a sweet creature. Clutching her dress, Art shyly gives him permission to call her by name. He notices her struggle with titles and thinks she is incredibly cute. He asked what she came to tell him after he called her Art. She babbles in a trembling voice that she is worried about how exactly those strangers who have already arrived behave. She takes a deep breath, gathering courage to speak. Artis expresses his concern because the village lacks protection. Van agrees they must meet the guests at his home to assess them. Let him come as soon as possible and enthusiastically help by volunteering for part of this team in Sparta. He rushes off from the place with incredible speed and is full of inexhaustible energy. Van mews on the new structure on the double like endurance training. He thinks that Kamzin voluntarily undergoes the hellish training D. Unrestrained hostility with comrades drives him to train even more fiercely. Young warriors push themselves to the limit of absolute physical capabilities. Van's sensations quickly increase the gap in endurance compared to his own. Admiration and wonder are already whispered, noting how incredible Thompson is. Kumsan reports that the delegates have already arrived, and they will be taken to the room. A gray-haired man nervously stands and asks if this is Sitabalage. Van silently contemplates the unfamiliar name, and his gaze becomes focused. The gray-haired man looks confusedly at the strange large city that has appeared before him. Van asks Sparta if he knows a place called Cedar Village. Sparta shudders with realization the name already exists here. He repeatedly recalls memories of Van's antics and feels disappointment growing, tightening his chest. He remembers how Van's subconscious tactics tricked him and forced him to name the village. Sparta glances fiercely, and irritably this man is asking again about Van Village. The old man does not suspect by size and terrain he is sure he is in the right place. He notices how much the village has changed since his childhood. Struck by Esparta's sharp tone, the man recalls his purpose. He explains that his people came from a neighboring village seeking refuge. Van considers all the difficulties of immigration and asks why they are leaving. The man explains that their village cannot pay taxes, but the count does not care. They bypass the closer towns, preferring to join the territory of the Marquis. Van sinks into a deep, thoughtful silence, weighing all his options. He is torn, he wants to help, but fears the political consequences. The old man begs him and asks if he will take them in. Van offers them food, shelter, and tax-free conditions in return. He demands only hard work. He learns that they brought 13 people, but more than 300 still remain. The pious man offers his 3-year-old granddaughter as a servant. Van is struck by how in this world human lives are treated without any caution. He offers a cart, but the man says they have their own cows. The man clarifies, their cows can carry their own load and on the return trip as well. When the conversation turns to cows and milk, Van's eyes light up with pure joy. Rejoicing at the prospect of cows, Van generously offers the mayor housing and escort. A close-up shows the old man's face twisted with complete shock and utter disbelief. The old man slaps his palm on the table and makes a stunning statement. He is not the mayor. A group of newly arrived peasants freeze in awe and collectively look at what has unfolded before them. A huge house towers above them. They notice it is even bigger than Lord's manor. The boy cannot believe it and aloud asks if the Lord himself could simply swap houses. Van announces a future welcome party, which greatly surprises the tired peasants. With a confident face, Van secretly boasts that his own style is better than any furniture. While he was already being interrogated, Van's delegates extended the task to prepare fields for them and check the curfew for the newcomers. A sudden insight strikes Van when inside he realizes the works of artists are the answer to the quantity for daughter Nado. Weightlessly, without unnecessary words, Art explains his decision to provide food and shelter for the needy peasants. Art praises his kindness. One can be sure, now the peasants under his care are destined to live a wonderful life. The gaze of the young lord becomes serious and piercing as he contemplates what to say next. 2 months later, he directly asked Art what she thinks about the village and how she sees her future. Slightly blushing, Art quietly admits that she truly believes staying will make her even happier. Considering their youth, Van gently advises postponing the question of marriage. Then Art Gass makes a sincere confession. She wants to marry Lord Van. Completely stunned and shocked, Van asks if she is really serious about wanting to marry. A wave of mutual awkwardness covers them. They are embarrassed and unable to utter a word. Alone, he panics and Van reminds himself, a gentleman should not humiliate a woman in public. Leaning in very close, he whispers her advice, to pretend he did not hear her confession. He mumbles to himself, trying to digest the incredibly awkward but at the same time pleasant situation. Art points to his strange walk, but he cheerfully insists that she is just imagining things. With a joyful grin, he smiles and thinks that men are creatures who, when loved, simply shine with happiness. Details of the new architecture in the village signify the progress they have achieved. Stomping roughly, a man named Ortha announces his return to the village yard. The villagers jump up at the shout, panicking as they ask why he is covered in blood. Laughing through exhaustion, he admits that he found the entrance to the dungeon. Van and his companions silently shuddered in surprise as soon as they heard the word dungeon. In a wide shot, silhouettes of villagers working on this huge discovery. The initial shock quickly turns into a state of general, deafening panic. This discovery is a cursed event, known for attracting monsters, traitors, and fortune seekers. The advisor loomed over the young lord, and anxiety froze on his face before the grim new reality. The bespectacled man explains the urgent need to report the dungeon to the capital. Young Van regrets the time but agrees they must report it quickly. The elderly mind runs through how much preparation is needed for the upcoming influx. Lord Van reins in the horse, asks the scout to deliver the report to the capital. The chosen scout, Kyuzala, shouts in shock that he himself is being sent on this mission. Van says since Kyuzala is the scout, it means he was the one who found her. One woman expresses concern, and another man offers a reward, one large gold coin. Van offers a valuable mithril sword, and Kyuzala remains feeling completely cornered and even a puppet in someone's hands. Kyuzala's friends burst out in playful protest, teasing him for the unfair solo mission. With their missions, Ortho's party and Kyuzala set out on different journeys. His mood has evened out. Kyuzala cheerfully walks through the forest, happily humming a merry tune. He admires the excellent grip of the sword, praising the exquisite taste in weapons of his young lord. At dusk, the solitary traveler sets up camp, resting by the fire near ancient ruins. He continues his march through the vast, desert expanse of the jagged mountains. Again admiring the sword, he believes the rest of his journey will pass swiftly. A sharp, clear screech of a wheel suddenly interrupts the peaceful journey. The horse rears in panic, and the broken carriage blocking the way ahead opens up. A terrible scene unfolds right before the eyes. Monsters devour the wagons with passengers who have been killed. From his hiding place, Kyuzal recognizes the horrific scene as the work of the works of works. He reflects on the nature of the labor of creatures consumed by their instant impulses. The beast is driven by bloodthirstiness. They are entirely focused on the victims in the carriages. He acknowledges that orcs are usually very tough opponents, so he prepares for battle. A confident smile spreads across his face. He knows now they are nothing to him. With a mighty battle cry, the adventurer bursts straight into the midst of the orcs. His body becomes a blur of motion as he unleashes a swift, deadly attack. The growling beasts are caught off guard and sharply turn to look at their attacker. He jumps onto the back of one beast and drives his sword deep into its powerful body. The warrior Kola notices his monster opponent has no real combat skills. He instantly changes stance and thrusts the blade, cutting the second orc with furious strength. He is captivated by Lord Van's sword. He is impressed by its power and admits he could get used to it. The rescued woman approaches, her cloak billowing, and she thanks him for the help. He panics, rejecting her assumption that he is a high-ranking man on a mission. With an understanding smile, she accepts his explanation and prepares to continue her journey. The woman named Flameria Bose says she cannot repay him now, but will definitely show her gratitude later. Kyuzala offers her a ride on his horse as an adventure, and she accepts it easily and gracefully. Secretly chuckling softly, Flameria reveals that she is actually already 30 years old. A brief moment of transition passes just as they begin their shared journey. Kyuzala jokes that she is flat, and every time she makes a quip when asked about her destination in the capital. Her face fills with sadness as she explains that the guide suddenly ran away. Then he asks what her reason is for coming to the city alone. Flameria reveals her father, a baron, died in battle and the house went bankrupt. Choking with shame, she says she regrets. She should not have shown her trouble so openly. Kyuzala calms her, explaining that in such a situation she is not alone, she is also a free bird. He gives a sincere promise to the protector, and his sincerity moves her to tears. In the Adventurers Guild, a major announcement is made about a new dungeon discovery. It is officially reported where it is located in the village of the famous Baron Van Neferthio. The society learns that the guild plans to establish a new branch in a promising location. To encourage exploration, all materials from this territory will be bought at an increased price. Special rewards are promised for mapping the dungeon and sending travelers into a frenzy. An excited crowd surrounds Kyuzala, demanding details about the dungeon and the slain dragon. Overwhelmed with thoughts, he states that he is busy and announces that he is going home. He wouldn't catch fire, but the entire guild grid throws itself in pursuit, striving for prey. After they stocked up on supplies, they suddenly set off. They are leading a huge caravan from the capital. In the wagon, Flamery openly rejoices and thanks Kyuzala for everything. He looks at her with a soft, supportive gaze. Kyuzala tells her that she will find this village interesting, and that her smile will become even brighter. Flameria looks at him warmly and says she is looking forward to it. A long caravan full of tired but determined travelers keeps on the path. One traveler guesses that Kyuzala took a direct route to test his new mithril sword. The strict leader orders the cooing subordinate to return to his place. The adventurers quietly converse and complain about each other due to the recent harshness of their leaders. One woman is shocked by the incredible number of peasants who decided to relocate. A man reflects on the harsh reality of life in remote, decayed villages. He knows the decision to leave behind their entire world was not an easy one. A battered man encourages a woman who is staggering from exhaustion. The woman voices her doubt, seeing this step as a futile and hopeless stunt. A crippled man promises his doubtful companions that their long journey will lead them to a true paradise. A man with a noticeable scar shouts in triumph announces his arrival, and the woman beside him says aloud that she does not understand anything at all. During a noisy banquet, young Lord Vogan warmly welcomes the arrivals and says they have reached Sito village. He explains that the barbecue is held to foster friendship between new and old residents. After the celebration, he promises everyone that they will be immediately taken to their new homes for the night. The new mayor Superv bows low in gratitude, and Van introduces himself and greets them. Van welcomes a traveler named Ortho, who modestly brushes off talk of heroism, saying it is just ordinary work. After the fight, the boy, exhausted and stunned, weakly asked for food, while another man laughed, talking about their amazing rescue with the help of a ballista. A capable girl named Till takes care of the children. She orders comrades to prepare soup and meat. The children watch the feast in awe, and one whispers that a whole plate is more food than she sees in a week. With a bright smile, Van encourages everyone. Eat to your heart's content, there is enough space for everyone. A woman arranges dinner in the bath, sits next to someone, and shares a quiet moment amid the noisy communal meal. Overwhelmed with emotions, the woman begins to cry and whispers that the food is incredibly delicious. The entire village, from the elderly to the very young, shares the glow of faces illuminating their joy at the cheerful feast. Van looks at his happy people, a gentle, satisfied smile, with loyal companions standing on the sides. He reflects on his own happiness, glad that the hard work preparing for the newcomers was not in vain. His thoughts reveal everything went smoothly until the neighboring villagers appeared. Then Van reveals his ambitious new plan to build a temporary town for adventures. The story says that the 8-year-old leader Van worked the hardest of all. A consultant points out the urgent need to build housing for the numerous travelers already arriving. A dark transitional moment marks the beginning of a grand new construction project. Van imagines the city INS for travelers and wonders if a city has ever been built in just 1 month. With a determined look, he begins to organize the details of his grand plan. He calculates that 10 tall buildings and several shops will be enough to accommodate about 400 people. The plan also includes a 5-meter rampart wall and 15 fortified defensive ballast sections for cover. A tall, stately figure named Esparta looms over Van and agrees. Preparing a new settlement is a good idea. Esparta apologizes for intervening earlier, then raises critical administrative issues regarding new businesses. Van considers the logistics and concludes, managing the ends and keeping everything in his own warehouses will be more profitable. He proposes appointing shop managers to collectively govern the city, ensuring better oversight. Since Esparta hints at an alternative, founding the chivalric order, which could be managed by a person named D. The conversation turns to security for the people and the need to track mercenaries at night. Esparta sharply declares that she is transferring the role of magistrate to Van. He confirms that he will find the city manager, and Van doubts why 2 separate night orders are needed. With a cheeky smile, Van says that Team D will handle the existing order for Sito. He boldly asks Esparta if this is revenge. Feigning childish innocence, the mentor breathes irritably from helplessness. A young girl named Art, elegantly dressed, quietly approaches Vaughn and asks if she can join him. Van agrees, apologizing for his manners. He is going to eat on the go and watch the villagers. 2 of Van's companions, Restless Thompson and Smiling Tile, observe the interaction. They both enthusiastically agreed to join Vaughn and Art on their holiday walk. Then this small group of 4 sets off to meet and get acquainted with the villagers. Van sees the crowded banquet and immediately notices a practical problem. There are not enough chairs for everyone. Noticing a sturdy man, Van asked him to bring 3 chairs for their group. Thanking the man, Van leans closer and offers him a position in Nushevel Recorder. The man is stunned by the offer. He bowed low and staggered from stammering, saying he would think about it. Satisfied with the quick recruitment, Van decides to invite all other skilled-looking warriors he notices. A group of women approaches Van, explaining that they have no savings to set aside and asks if there is any work. He reassures them by offering jobs in the new shops and finishing work or plowing fields. The women admit that they have no experience in trade, showing their concern. Van promises them a wide range of jobs from customer service and cleaning to other vacancies. He tells them not to worry about complicated finances, will hire an accountant to handle it all. An old man, whose voice trembles with emotion, tells how the arrival of the Vans saved their village from ruin. He closes his eyes, confessing he never thought he would live a life full of such smiles and joy. With tears in their eyes, the villagers watch as the old man expresses hope that Van will smile along with them. Van declares that this is only the beginning. The crowd erupts with joyful cheers, promising loyalty and hard work. Now this village is filled with energy and hope, where survival has given way to joy. Van makes a loud announcement ordering his people to gather and build a new city.